call please.
Mayor Brooke.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Metzger. Here. Councilmember French. We're going to be working on getting you dialed in. Councilmember Meredith.
Here.
Councilmember Kidd. Here. Councilmember Moran.
Here.
Councilmember Sherman Gordon. Manager West.
Present.
Attorney Gordon.
Here.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we will begin the public comment section. Please note that there is a public hearing, and that's separate from the public comment right now. So if you have anything that you would like to, we'll begin the sign-up list, that you would like to tell us about, this is the time to do so. If it regards the parcel, then please state that when we open the public hearing. All right? So we'll start with Pam Lindquist.
Okay. I'm Pam Lindquist. I'm a resident of Port Angeles. I want to talk to the City Council about community service. It's something I strongly believe in. And right now, the way things work, there's usually different service clubs or churches, or sometimes motivated individuals who will come up with an idea of what they can do to serve this community. And that's lovely, but their reach is only to their members or people they know. And so what I'm wanting to do is have more of a collaborative process for community service projects. To have a space here that will show the projects that are being done, and also a side that will show the amazing things that we can accomplish when we're working together. If you look at what we've done in the last 2 months with all the crises and hardships that Port Angeles and the nation has faced, and we see that we've all come together, we've really stepped up to take care of each other, to look out for each other. That's the kind of thing that I think we need to see more of, we need to celebrate, and that's what I'm asking. I'm also asking for the city to allow or to help work with those motivated individuals to have some projects, such as like the cleanup of Lincoln Park. We have a lot of people that would love to be able to get in there, use the park again. They're willing to get in there, work together. Let's build this community, one community member at a time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. So I have Al Owen.
My name is Al Oman. I reside at 214 Hancock Avenue in Port Angeles, Washington. Thank you, Mayor and members of Council, for this opportunity. This has to do with pedestrian safety versus traffic flow in downtown Port Angeles. I have built, maintained, and repaired traffic signals on the North Olympic Peninsula since 1987. I have concern with taking the downtown signals out of time, termed coordination in the field of traffic signal design. However, I do understand your concern for pedestrian safety when crossing the street. I have those same concerns. Traffic signals are designed for flow of traffic and flow of pedestrians, and with the safety of both being the highest priority. By taking the signals out of coordination, the outcome would equal one big traffic mess. This impeded traffic flow would back up to the previous intersection, not allowing north and southbound traffic to flow. This is termed gridlock. I've seen this firsthand. As a maintenance technician, I would get a call that the signals are out of time. It's a top priority to get there, to get the signals back into time, because the traffic backs up pretty fast. Especially during the tourist season and when the ferry traffic is letting off, if that happened to be at that exact same time. The concern for pedestrian crossing the street is focused on 5 mid-block crossings. These crossings have no pedestrian detection, as well as no signage, in other words, no walk or don't walk signals. Also, speakers sounding for a vision impaired could also be installed. One solution would be to add walk and don't walk signage, as well as push buttons to allow for pedestrian detection. There would also need to be flashing signage for vehicle traffic to indicate to them that there is a pedestrian in the crosswalk. This system would be timed, coordinated with the downstream traffic signal. It would only allow pedestrians to cross to get the walk sign when the downstream traffic signal is red. This system would do 2 things. One, it would add a level of safety for pedestrians when crossing that mid-block crossing. And 2, it would increase traffic flow. I say increase traffic flow, this is in terms of not allowing pedestrians to cross at their own free will, but to have them wait until that downstream signal is red, just like you would at any intersection. How many times have you been held up by a pedestrian just to be stopped at the stoplight at the next intersection? There are systems designed to meet the needs that would be solar-powered LED signage and wireless frequency-controlled relays.
Go ahead and wrap it.
Okay, thank you. To coordinate these mid-block crossings with the downstream traffic signal. Also, what needs to be addressed is the signals that are currently in place, flash mode, between the hours of midnight and 6 in the morning. This was done to allow traffic flow and not to have the traffic have to stop on the northbound and southbound traffic. Let's see. This was done to allow traffic to keep flowing and not to have to stop when there is no cross-street traffic. Excuse me on that. It used to be when one would get the yellow light, it was time to slow down because the red light was coming. Now too often people seem to speed up when they get that yellow light. With the flashes, with the signals in flash, the northbound and southbound traffic flash red and the eastbound and westbound traffic flash yellow. In this flash mode, the pedestrian's head shut off.
Sir, can you write that up? I'm afraid that you usually get 3 minutes a person, and so...
Okay, should I give you a copy of this then?
Yes, actually, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The next person on the list is Chris McNulty.
Hi, this is the first one I've ever been here, so.
So you can state your name and whether you live in the city.
Okay, I'm Chris McNulty, and I live at the,
Just whether you reside in the city or not.
I live at Albert and Front Street, and I'm actually here to talk about the crosswalk at Albert and Front Street. It's super dangerous, and my daughter just left, you all heard. We try to go for walks every day, and every day going across that crosswalk, we usually have to wait like a minute or 2 for people to actually stop. And that's everybody. It's normal people that live here, people from out of town, police officers, everybody. They just won't stop. You could be out walking into the middle of the street, people will go around you. So I don't know if there's any sort of funding for putting in like a flashing crosswalk thing, kind of like over at the playground by the field. But if you guys could put one of those in, that'd be really cool. And then the other thing is that there's a huge pollution problem here, and it's pretty broad. But I want to know if there's any sort of like agenda for making sure that the city and the outskirts of the city too are holding themselves accountable for the amount of trash that ends up in the ocean and the emissions from all the vehicles here. I've noticed that a lot of diesel vehicles here don't follow at least it doesn't look like they follow any sort of emissions guidelines because they blow smog everywhere all the time. And even right outside of our apartment building, there's trash all the way down the alley, like all the way into town. And it's just kind of sad because we're 200 feet from the ocean. And so, I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Elizabeth Dunn.
Hi, good evening. Elizabeth Dunn. I own a residence in Port Angeles and I live in the county. I'm here to talk about the right to free speech and the right to protest, and this in general and also specifically as it relates to events that occurred in Lions Park on January 3rd. As many of you might be aware, a community member, Devon Gray, was arrested on that morning when she came to the park and discovered that a sequoia tree that she had been fighting very hard to save had been felled. And I came across a really good example of what I would like to suggest that how law enforcement should be interacting with the community in situations like this. So to be, not that we don't think law enforcement is important, but to recognize that law enforcement and the community need to work together in a situation like this. And that example came from a situation with a prominent Black Lives Matter leader in Los Angeles, a professor actually at California State University, Melina Abdullah, and she had been charged with obstruction of justice and obstruction of an officer, disrupting a public meeting, and this was the police commission meetings occurring, which became rather heated at various times in Los Angeles. And the charges were dropped against her, and as part of that agreement, they put into place a process that actually exists in the LA council meetings, and that is so that people can feel free to speak out and express themselves without just getting arrested. And that process was that the person is able to express themselves. If they're being disruptive, they're asked to leave. If they don't leave, then they're escorted out. And then if there's still an issue, then they could be warned and then arrested. And that process would apply perfectly well to the situation that occurred in Lions Park with some compassion and understanding. This community member could have been easily calmed down, spoken to, allowed to express herself, and then been escorted out of the park, and we would not have had an arrest on that day. And so I encourage you to tell the prosecutor that you're still hearing about this because this is still going on. This isn't an event that occurred that's isolated that we've all forgotten about. It's still happening. A trial is still scheduled. So my ask of you all is to contact the prosecutor and to let them know that this is not how we should be handling these situations, and to ask that the charges be dropped against Devon Gray. And I know that there's, I think, a presentation tonight on housing needs, and this ties into that issue because if you look at the fact that a lot of people who are houseless are found in public places and asked to leave. And if you end up getting arrested for basically speaking your mind or being in the wrong place at the wrong time, according to a law enforcement officer, it has serious implications for your life. So thank you for your consideration. I do ask that you take this seriously and that you take action. Thank you.
Thank you. Jasmine Hunt.
Before we begin, I have some small images, handouts. Pass them around, please. Thank you. My name is Jasmine Hunt. I live at 438 Lopez, Port Angeles, with Devon Gray, ex-member of Port Angeles Tree Advisory Board and Lions Park Sequoia advocate, arrested January 3rd. My father, he called it my beauty duty, to share the beauty of the mountains and forests with others, to help them love our natural world that they too would wish to protect it, to stand up for what's right and fair, to speak for future generations and all the poor innocent creatures of nature, just as Herb Chrysler did in front of Congress during the formation of Olympic National Parks, speaking for the animals. My father was a naturalist, wildlife biologist, and 9th grade biology teacher. Every summer, we'd hike and explore the Olympics and Canadian Rockies. He passed away this last Sunday afternoon. He was 82. At the Lions Park MLK event, I spoke to the injustice of the Sequoia's loss and Devon Gray's arrest and being prevented from entering Lions Park. As she stood outside the fence, the vast majority of the 75 attendees turned and clapped for Devon, showing her support and that she was a hero for standing up for what's right. Manager West speaks of demonstrating through action that they have a tree ethic and that it's something that needs to be tackled. The action of tackling Devon Gray, a tree board member who represented ethical oversight, shows his concept of this idea. The morning of January 3rd, police start patrolling Lions Park at 4 a.m. to prevent protesters, but fail to post the park as closed. 7:30 a.m., the chainsaw starts and emails sent to city council members of tree being removed. 7:40 a.m., Councilman Lindsay Showman-Warren calls us to say that the city is moving ahead on the tree today, and I hope you're in time. 7:50 a.m., Devon Gray enters Lions Park, devastated by the destruction that she sees, and attempts to restore order and achieve justice for the sequoia by attempting citizens' arrest of the perpetrators. Moments later, she is thrown to the ground and physically traumatized herself. Pictures were taken by the officer with blood on Devon's face. Still, the trauma continues with the city trying to punish Devon for caring with a trial coming up. The mayor has asked Manager West if the charges against Devon could be dropped, and he replies that it's out of his hands, it's up to the prosecutor. Devon's lawyer says horse hockey, he could if he wanted to. Haven't we suffered enough? I am suffering even today. 34 days to remove the trunk. This was not thought out, and you made us suffer by leaving it there. I am therefore submitting a notice of claim for mental and emotional damage caused by the city's actions. In the land of twilight, of werewolves and vampires, it's amazing how well the cross banishes evil. February 5th, a cross showed up in Lions Park, planted near the sequoia. The very next day, the city finally removed the trunk, the next the stump. Finally, Nathan's dirty deed was gone. True justice would be Nathan Weston for a Delcott on trial.
And Noreen Hansen.
Hello, my name is Noreen Hansen, and I'm a resident of Port Angeles, at least I think that. Recently, my boyfriend and I has become homeless due to some landlords who seems to think they could raise rents, which you guys have known, I've been here a few times. My question to you is, what are we doing about helping the homeless and helping them get off the streets? And how are we supposed to go about changing the rules that landlords cannot raise rent $200, $300, $400 at a time? This is not right, and this is middle winter. As you know, we've had a lot of snow, there's a lot of homeless people. Do you know the impact when people ask you, where do you live? And you have to tell them, I'm homeless. It sends a big impact to a lot of people. They look at you like, oh, you're homeless, so you're worthless. That is not true. A lot of us who are homeless are hardworking people who are just struggling, trying to find a way to have a home. I haven't seen anybody going out on the streets and handing out blankets or anything to the homeless. Yes, you guys put out some places where they can go and get a bite to eat. That doesn't help them. They gotta have a warm place, they gotta feel secure. I know we don't. Because every time we find a place, someone's got to raise the rent sky high. Then you got to move out. You lose everything you have. I don't know about you. I would like to find a way where we can stop that in Port Angeles. We have landlords around here. Some of them are very good and some of them are very greedy. I would like some help to find out what we can do to stop this. I don't know about you. Being homeless is not a nice option. You spend most of your time figuring out, how am I going to survive the day? How am I going to survive the night? Especially in this weather that we have right now. I am quite devastated. I'm very upset, not just for me, but for everybody that's in that same situation. If I had the money, nobody would be homeless. I just hope you guys can all stand together and help fight that. Some of these landlords are coming in from other places, other cities, and they're saying our rent here is too low. Well, of course, for them it would, because they live in the big cities. They can afford $1,000 a rent. Here, we don't make that kind of money. But yet, they're coming in, buying everything and saying, oh yes, you either will spend that money, spend how much we say you are going to do, or you're out on the street, which is what our landlord told us. He said, we don't care. So I hope you guys will stop and think about how we can get together and change the rules. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, there's nobody else on the list. So anybody else who would like to speak on, I guess, any item that you're interested, please step up to the mic. And if not, we will conclude the public comment period. There will be another one at the very end of the meeting. All right, so we have about 9 minutes. So do you want to go ahead with the presentation? The North Olympic Healthcare Network.
Madam Mayor, I would suggest that at this time.
Okay. Council okay with that? Okay, great.
Thank you. Do I have 9 minutes or I was prepared for 15?
Go ahead, you got 15 and then we'll start the public hearing.
Great, thank you. Yes, I talk fast, but you don't want me to talk that fast. Is there, I think there are slides, and I need a, this thing needs some help.
You will end up
I have medicine for it, but it's, what's that? Okay, great. Oh, great. So, just getting set up. Thank you very much, Mayor Workman, and council members for inviting me on this busy and bustling evening.
In the meantime, can I get you on the mic? Because that way folks who are listening
Oh, gotcha.
will hear it and it gets recorded better.
Great. Well, thank you for having me on this this evening. I will hopefully give you some information that you find interesting, maybe even helpful. I think most of you know me. I'm Dr. Mike Maxwell. I've been practicing primary care since 1991 here in Port Angeles. And up until 3 years ago, I was also doing obstetrics, but I had to stop delivering babies because I had to deliver at a health center. And so I'm going to give you a little information about that. That was good, thank you. So, I'll try and keep this merciful. I'll try and be brief. The good news is I'm a fast talker. That's also the bad news. The other good news is I'm not here to ask anything of you. I'm not here to ask you for any funding or any special support. I'm just here to give you information that you might find helpful in your day-to-day work as your healthcare issues that come across your desks. I think a good place to start. Clicker impaired here apparently.
Dr. Maxwell, I would suggest the down arrow on the keyboard is an easier way to get through if that works for you.
That's what he's a city manager. Thank you. So a good place to start is with our mission. And our mission is to provide patient-centered, quality-driven, whole-person healthcare services that are available, that are accessible to everyone in our community. That's our goal. And I'm going to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes kind of giving you some background, some context about the organization's mission and what it potentially means for the community. So we are a old organization that became new again. So we started out as a two-person private practice in family medicine back in 1979. It was family in Port Angeles. And over the subsequent 10 years, grew to 5 partners. I was one who joined in 1991. That prompted us to move from our building on 16th and C down to a building on 8th and Cherry. And over the next 10 years, we grew more. I guess my math is impaired. By 2009, we're up to 8 physicians, 3 nurse practitioners, and that led us to move to our current location at the Downtown Health Center. And that was, we worked with the city to, I think we were one of the first new developments down in that area back then. We're living where the city light trucks were, and it looks a little nicer there, so it smells a little better too. And by 2014, we had grown to a size that kind of put us at a turning point. So 2014 was we kind of reached a crisis. We had grown to a certain point under that model as private practice, but things have changed under our feet. The new physicians coming out of practice or out of residency into training into practice were not interested in that model. They were not looking to join practice, to buy in, to run a practice. It had a particularly rough time because we had a retiring physician. We had one of my partners became ill and passed away. We had a couple of physicians relocate, so it left us with a shrinking provider workforce and a lot of patients to take care of. And it came at a really bad time for those of you who were in town around 2013, 2014. If you did not have a physician, you were out of luck. There was nobody taking new patients. And we did not like having to turn people away. We couldn't even take care of what we had, much less take on new patients. So there was a big gap between community need and our ability to meet that need, to give them access to care. The Affordable Care Act came into effect around that time, which gave people more insurance. That's a good thing, but insurance with nobody taking it doesn't help. So that exacerbated the problem. There's still a high percentage of uninsured, underinsured, or people facing poverty, which further impair their access to care. And we were challenged by recruitment challenges because our private practice model was not attractive. We're a rural area, and it's hard to attract new physicians in rural areas as a primary care shortage nationwide. So that led us to realize that we had to do something different. What we were doing was not working. So we got together as a partner and said, what's the path forward for the future that's sustainable? That led us to decide to transform our private practice into something called the community health center model. And right around 2015, there was a grant opportunity put out by the Health Services Resources Administration. These come available periodically. And these are grant funds that are made available for either start or transform a community health center in communities that are underserved. And we thought we were going to just completely transform a model and pursue this. It's a very competitive application, very difficult to get. We realized later that most places tried 5 times before they actually get this designation. And we got it the first time because we had a strong application, volunteer community, a lot of support from the community and from our state and federal delegations. So we were one of 164 health centers that were awarded in 2015, one of 2 in Washington State. This is a big deal. And we realized just how big a deal until we got further into it, but it really is. And in typical federal fashion, we got the award on May 1st and said, I have 120 days to become a fully operational community health center. It's like converting a Cessna to a 747 mid-flight in 120 days, but we did it. The reason we became North Olympic Healthcare Network in that process. The reason we did it is because we thought it would help to address the long-term healthcare workforce needs for the community. It was going to put us in a position to be in a more sustainable reimbursement environment. I'll give a little more information on that later. It will provide us some recruitment incentives that will help us attract new physicians to the community through our National Health Service Core Loan Repayment Program. And the health center model really helps to, it requires and supports a broader scope of services for our patients, which were never available in the community before, at least not in the model that they're available in the health center. So you'll hear the term FQHC, or Federally Qualified Health Center, or CHC, Community Health Center. They're the same thing. They're synonymous terms. The FQHC refers more to a billing designation, a reimbursement designation, but the CHC is the correct designation. And it really became, the health center program began in 1964 as an extension of the civil rights movement. It was based upon the concept that healthcare was a basic human right. It was kind of radical at that time. It was designed to help get medically underserved areas healthcare, those rural and urban areas. The legislation was signed into law by President Johnson. It's been expanded by the administration since then. It's one of the few things that's had bipartisan support.
Under President Bush, it expanded quite a bit in the 80s, and then with President Obama, for the Affordable Care Act, there was a push to expand programs across the country, and that's on the ACA is where we got our grant funding. Under President Trump, it's still unsure, but so far there's been no contraction in the program. There's a lot of chaos on Capitol Hill, so we're just kind of watching and see what happens. There are about 1,900 community health centers nationwide. They serve collectively 27 million people. 7 million of them are children, and about 4 million of them are veterans. And what's unique about the health center model is it was really, let's go back over 50 years ago, it was the first attempt at what's called a fully integrated model of preventive care. It's quite radical at the time. Now, the rest of the world's kind of coming towards this. But the health center program has been pushing this model since the beginning. It's where you get your physical health, your medical care, your behavioral, emotional health, and oral health all under one roof. It's an integrated health system. We also provide maternity services, pediatrics. There's a requirement that we have nurse care managers that reach out and give care to patients between their visits. We have patient navigators to break down barriers to care, and then we provide pharmacy and vision services as well. There's a focus on the chronic care management, these enabling services to provide transportation, translation services for patients, to give them access to insurance, prevention, education, and one key thing that's, I think, relevant for this council is that collaboration is in our DNA. That's what health centers are there to help collaborate with other resources in the community to identify needs and meet those. The benefits of being a health center for the organization is that it gets us access to what's called cost-based reimbursement. For the Medicaid population, currently DSHS reimburses private providers about 30 cents on the dollar, which is why it's very difficult for many private practices to take on a large volume of Medicaid patients because it's hard to keep the doors open. Under the health center, with that designation, in exchange for providing the services and the quality and the regulations that go along with that, we are guaranteed to be paid what it costs us to provide that care, which is a game changer. We have access to federal grant support that roughly makes about 90% of our budget. It gives us access to improved recruitment tools such as National Service Corps loan repayment. Malpractice costs are reduced because we're actually covering the federal government, so there's not that big expense, which is a big plus. It gives us a better economic environment and for training a new workforce. We have expanded services for our patients, and we are a mission-driven organization, which helps us plan strategically, set goals, and achieve them effectively. So it's not all unicorns and rainbows. There are some prices to pay for it. One is we have to be a 501c3 nonprofit, and so we convert our private practice into a 501c3 nonprofit. We're governed by a board. It's actually made up of the community, which is by statute, it must be at least 51% patients at the health center. So there's a group of patients at the health center may get tapped someday to be on the board. You have to have a very robust quality improvement program, very strict quality improvement requirements. Our health center actually got the highest designation for the National Community Quality Assurance, NCQA for level 3 patient-centered medical home. There's not going to be any of those nationwide, so I can review. There's a lot of federal reporting. As I said, you guys live in government, know that. So we report our clinical outcomes, our service volumes, the cost, utilization, and staffing is reported either quarterly or annually. We are subject to federal site surveys every 3 years, and we are required to be 100% compliant with over 320 different separate regulations. We just had ours last month, and got 100% right out of the gate. So we're really happy about that. We do that every 3 years. It's the administrative colonoscopy with no anesthesia. So the big federal compliance burden, and this is the key feature, is that one of the requirements is that we provide access to care regardless of someone's ability to pay. So if they're based upon their income and their family size, if they will discount the cost of the services down to zero. So cost will never be a barrier to care. If someone says, I can't afford to see the doctor, send them our way, because we make sure it's affordable. And we have to reapply for the status every 3 years, which is making sure that we are meeting our statutory requirements. So the impact, what has this transformation done? Well, it has been successful in helping us get 9 new positions in the past 3 years to our community, and 5 mid-level providers, so we're up to 20 providers. And with that increased workforce, we have nearly 5,000 new patients in the past 3 years. These are people who did not have access. They were called and they were turned away, and who now have a medical home. That's a big impact. And so nowhere ever again should you hear, I can't find a doctor. The health center is there to meet that access need in perpetuity. We have about 13,000 active patients right now. About a third of them are Medicaid, a little more than that are Medicare. These are the low payers, and with our reimbursement structure, we're able to actually handle that payer mix and do okay. We take care of uninsured, and we'll have the sliding fee scales down to $0 if that's what your income dictates. We have integrated behavioral health, so we actually have PhD psychologists, licensed social workers, and we just hired this month a psychiatrist from UCSF who's going to join the community, and she'll join us in the summer. So we can provide a wide range of behavioral health services for our patients. We were also one of the leaders in providing and addressing the opioid crisis that's in our county, and it's like so many other rural areas. So we were one of the first, and actually had the greatest number of MAT waiver. This special license allows you to treat opioid addiction with medication called Suboxone. And I won't go into that tonight, but it's been a very effective way of giving people who are struggling with this a foothold to get out of that. We've seen some big successes. We have nurse care managers and patient navigators, as I mentioned, that provide take away those barriers. And we've been able to get in a position to be able to expand our future workforce. So we were a key partner with the Swedish and OMC in bringing the family medicine residency to Port Angeles. So we have our first residence there, started in June, and after next year we'll have our complement of 4 residents training in town from this point forward. And the studies say that roughly half of the residents who train in the community will stay in that community. So this is investing in the workforce for the future for decades to come. We're also a training site for medical students from the University of Washington, and also a training site for the Peninsula College Medical Assistant Program. We just started a foray into the having a presence in high school. Teenagers, for some reason, they don't go see the doctor. And they, even when they're on campus, so we're still trying to figure that part out, but we're there for that. We've gone from 35 employees to over 100 in the past 3 years, and we have a payroll of over $8 million. So that makes us, I think someone can tell me, I think we're the largest employer in town, and a big economic driver. But this is it's a role health centers play in their communities. We do bring a lot of revenue to the community to drive the economy. We opened our second site on First Street to expand our services for behavioral health and urgent care. And I'm very happy to say we are in the middle of building a dental clinic that will see Medicaid patients. So we applied for a state dental capacities capital grant for the last biennium. Won't fund all of it, but a good chunk of it. And that's going to help us address this statistic. Less than a quarter of all adults on Medicaid get access to oral health. Because it pays so poorly, most of the private dentists can't afford to see them. And so they just have all this deferred care, rotting teeth, all the health consequences that go along with that, and the ER, and we will be able to see those patients. And there's someplace now in town for them to go. We've been having, as an interim step, we've been collaborating with Irwin Dental Center, who's been providing that care for our patients on an interim basis with their dental resident. And it's been a really nice service that Irwin's done, so I want to give him kudos for that. And this is another big part. So the health center is a big part of the local and regional collaboration. We meet regularly with OMC in Jamestown. We're lucky in the community, we're not competing. We're just trying to get together and find a way what needs are there and how can we use the tools we have to meet those needs. And all the people see listed here all bring something to that table. We're working with all of them. PDH and BMO, we're part of the Olympic Community of Health, and it's a regional transformation project for Medicaid, and the health center is a key player in that. We work with the police department and fire department, Chief to be advocate, and knowing that we're working on this community paramedic, which may have, I'm not sure if it came to you, but we were real excited about this. So we're actually creating funds towards it, and I'm really excited about the potential it has for helping to keep people out of the ER and get them into their medical home where they can get their services more quickly. So thank you, Chief. And the take-home message. I don't see the light flashing, that's great. My other saliva, so good thing I'm done. Just think of us as a community health care resource. And we're here to improve access to care across the community. We're here in perpetuity. We're positioned to have a better impact on both healthcare outcomes and on the economy. We're a safety net provider to take care of the uninsured, all comers. We have been able to leverage a substantial federal investment in this community going forward. And we're positioned to address the long-term healthcare workforce shortages through the residency program. And we are a mission-driven and collaborative partner. We're here, if you see things that come and say, boy, I wonder if, think of us. And we're here to help any way we can. So my brain's full, yours is too.
Thank you, Dr. Hensel.
Can I make one quick comment? Back in 2013 and 14, many of us remember Virginia Mason pulled out on Port Angeles, stranding I don't know how many patients and on 8th Street. And then further down 8th Street, Dr. John Lewis retired after decades of service to the community, stranding again further patients. And you're really, thank you for coming in and building your practice and accepting everyone. We really needed that. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Madam Mayor, a word please before we continue. Just a quick observation please. We have two more presentations that need to be made. One, I think, will be generating quite a bit of interest and questions and take up a fair amount of time. We also have a public comment session on the surplusing of some property tonight. And so with that thought in mind, I think this is going to turn into be a very long meeting. And in deference to the staff who have put in extremely long hours due to the current weather-related emergency, and also with the dire conditions for the forecaster this evening, I would like to make a motion that we delete the think tank session from tonight's agenda.
Okay, I will second that for discussion.
All right, I would say that, so to address that point, I'd say let's see how the meeting goes, and if we're starting to get along, then we should, but otherwise, I'm not in favor of deleting that.
I made a motion, it was seconded, it's up to the council to make a vote.
Right, so this is discussion time.
I move to table that motion to later in the meeting before we start the think tank.
Second that motion.
All right, so we have two motions. Okay.
A motion to table is decided before the underlying motion.
Right, so the motion to table, so let's take up the motion to table. Any further discussion on that motion? So all those in favor of the motion to table that discussion to postpone, to remove the think tank from the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, so it passes 4-2. So it's tabled. All right, so we will move forward with the public hearing because we're supposed to get it as close to 6:30 as possible. And then after the public hearing, then we will move on to the presentations, the other presentations. So, Mr. West?
Madam Mayor and Council, I believe we're moving on to item F1.
Yes.
Madam Mayor and Council, tonight you have before you a public hearing that's being held to evaluate the surplus of a property located at the southwest corner of Front and Oak Street, approximately located between 240 Front Street and 120 Oak Street. Tonight, council is being asked to listen to the public, entertain public comment and input relative to this matter, and particularly look at whether or not this property in particular is necessary to the further and efficient operation of the city. In other words, does it continue to have a municipal purpose and a municipal purpose that the city can afford to fulfill? So with that, Madam Mayor, I would recommend we move forward, entertaining public comment as part of the public hearing this evening.
All right. So with that said, we will go ahead and open the public hearing on this parcel. So if there's anybody in the public who would like to make a comment regarding this item, please step up to the mic, state your name, and whether you live, whether you reside in the city or not.
Short person. My name is Beth Witters. I'm a resident of Port Angeles and also a business owner downtown and member of the Port Angeles Downtown Association. First off, we would like to suggest starting with a postponement of a decision this evening due to the disastrous weather that we had. We were unable to have our board meeting last week, and we were not able to have a meeting with Allison as part of the discussion at our meeting last night. I want to say that the PAD supports development downtown. We're very excited about the possibilities, but there are some questions that our members have had, and we've not had a chance to talk with other downtown businesses. I will begin with a list of, am I limited to 3 minutes on this?
Yes.
Okay, I'll start with them, and when my time is up, I will go on to have somebody else continue with the questions. Among some of the questions that were asked at last night's meeting was, will there be a sale of the property or a transfer, as the PDN mentioned, in exchange for future services? And I will hand this off to Sissy so that you will have these. And you've also given to Allison, who I believe has given it to Nathan as well. The reason we'd like an additional later comment period is that due to weather, we did not have access to our group to discuss the project in person and gather concerns. As you know, parking is an issue with strong feelings attached to it. Also giving right of first refusal to a private individual on publicly owned land that was partially funded by the Port Angeles Downtown Association. There is concern that there will not be binding contract to ensure replacing the parking will continue to be free. Will a mandatory provision be put in place as part of the conditions for sale that if the developer fails to produce a structure within 3 years, that the city can reclaim that property? How do we acquire right to first refusal and other public property individually? If I wanted to buy the parking lot next to my business, can I have right of first refusal? Since the downtown merchants help purchase the parking lot, what provisions will be put in place to ensure that new parking will be maintained and remain free? The goal of having the downtown lot was to provide free parking. Why can't the city lease the property to the developer for 99 years and maintain ownership? Since the downtown merchants originally contributed 50% towards the purchase of the lot, has the city done a survey to find out if the current surrounding businesses are on board with this proposal? How many parking spaces will DuPar be required to produce for the condo units, not including the spaces displaced from loss of the entire parking lot? If all of the downtown retail spaces are full, an additional plan for this project, would this new structure be the city's answer to additional parking needed? And I will pass this on to the next person.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm April Bellerud, and I'm the president of the Downtown Association. I actually live in Agnew, but have a business downtown. So just to continue this whole tribe of questions, what parking requirements have been put on the new Performing Arts Center? I know that's kind of an aside, but it was one of the questions that came up. And in the past, when Paloa put on their productions. The 3 parking lots up at the high school would be full, as well as on-street parking, and how does the new Performing Arts Center plan to accommodate that volume of vehicles? Again, a little to the side, but sort of related. Where will the people who currently park in that lot, including the contracted spaces, park? Will we be giving up more public parking for a private lease during the building process? Has a feasibility study been done to see if the physical space can handle this type of development, especially in addition to the project across the street? Is there any lead leakage from the previous firing range in the basement of the corner building? Has city staff taken into consideration that only Eric Dupar maintains his lease with the state as by his parking agreement with the city? Without development restrictions, his building value would go up, as would, sorry, this is worded strangely, guaranteed parking and the combined property value would go way up. It is not the public's job to increase Mr. Dupar's property value. And that's all the questions that we had. But again, it would be lovely to be able to actually talk to more people rather than just a small portion.
Great, thank you. Marilyn Smith, Port Angeles. Given, have we finished our housing assessment for the city? And if so, what number of these units of the apartment building will be made available for low-income or senior housing? And does the city have any stance on this? It seems like it's not well thought out yet. And also, if you have any spare property, I'll buy it. Thanks. All right. Anybody else who would like to speak on this topic?
John Ralston, city resident. I have the same or similar questions that this first group presented. The additional one was dealing with stacked parking. I don't know all the details, but when the city was involved in the project at where the bus terminal is and the parking there were some major engineering problems. I don't know what it pertains to or pertain to, and I would have similar concerns about a parking lot and the type of soils that it's built on, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not necessarily in favor nor opposed, just a heck of a lot more questions that need to be answered. Thank you.
Hi, Elizabeth then. I'm here. I thought I'd add a few things. I just wanted to say basically I support the Downtown Association and the idea that there should be more community input on this and time allowed. And also had the same question about the affordable housing, and having sat through some of the city council meetings and heard discussion about, wrestling with this problem of how you're going to create affordable housing. And when I heard the presentation about the plans for that lot, that's what I'd also wondered is there going to be a percentage of those units set aside for affordable housing? And then also what construction standards are going to be used? A lot of cities are implementing LEED certification for construction standards as well on new buildings and those types of requirements. So I'd just like to look at this holistically. How does that fit in? And also see that there's a lot of downtown space that is vacant. We have a lot of wonderful shops downtown, and that I love our downtown shops. The diversity, original stores, I think it's so important to support that. And so how does this change the character of that? Are these going to be big box type stores in here or what? And then how are we going to encourage to fill that space in the vacant space in the existing buildings? So, thanks.
All right. Anybody else out there who would like to address this topic? All right. I guess seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on this. So council, how do you or any discussion on this?
I think it's important that we cooperate and collaborate with our downtown association. And I'm excited about our new project, but we have a long-standing history of working together with the downtown association. I'd like to ask Mr. West if this was tabled until the next council meeting, time-wise, are we running into an issue? I just I just would like us to be able to have good discussions with our downtown association.
From my perspective, there are no timeframe implications relative to if we were to continue tonight's public hearing to the next meeting.
That would be my preference at this time. Thank you.
Well, there were a number of questions raised, and can we try and address a number of those now, or what's our plan for doing that?
So Council, if I may, we did receive many of the same questions that were asked. We got those about 4 p.m. this afternoon, so we haven't fully reviewed all of them, but I think we certainly can answer a number of those questions this evening. I think that as indicated in the memo, one of the primary factors incorporated with this agreement would be a no net loss of parking to the downtown. And that incorporates a commensurate number of public spaces. An example that I might provide is if you take a look at the gateway facility that was done by Column Transit, and the fact that we carried over and continued some of the public parking into that transit facility, including 3-hour, including permit-related business parking, including some longer-term parking. I would envision that we very much could continue all of those same uses and transition into a no net loss situation relative to downtown parking. Obviously, that's negotiable. That's something that is basically the city's position that we're going to be working with Mr. Dupar on to see if ultimately we can accommodate. I would say based on the numbers presented at your last meeting, you have more than an adequate number of parkings to fully mitigate any loss relative to parking. I do think it's very much the directive to staff that we ensure that we have security relative to the continuation and the successful completion of the project. The exact terms of that is something that will be negotiated in the future. I think too, there was a question brought up relative to right of first refusal and some historic interest of the downtown business owners. I think if you look back, one of the things that was done was in 2014, that's when the first right of refusal was granted to Mr. Dupar. And prior to that, in 2009, the downtown business ownership interest in all of the downtown parking lots was relinquished as part of the 2009 restructuring agreement with the Port Angeles Downtown Association. In addition, I can tell you the 99-year lease is not something we've contemplated at this point in time, but it's something that, if Mr. Dupar has interest in that, we can certainly talk about it. I'm not sure that it will ultimately result in penciling out of the project. Regarding parking requirements, I'm going to defer those questions to Ms. Brecky. I will say that since 2009, downtown has been market-based parking. So there is not typically a parking requirement allocated with a new development incorporated in the downtown. But Ms. Brecky can speak to some of the development coming up and what likely would be required for each of those. I don't want to get into the land use details. Many of the questions that were asked, including the feasibility question, the design and engineering based questions, those are items that are going to come out as part of the land use process. And that's not what the surplus process is about. I will say too that the appraisal will indicate ultimately the value of surrounding properties as well as this particular property. And that is something that council is required based on your action at the last meeting. We are going to be having an appraisal done for the property. And I think that hits most of them, but I'd be happy to have Bill Bloor or Allison answer any additional questions I might have missed.
Any other questions?
There's a question about right of first refusal. Could we get more history on how that happened?
I don't know that we'll have all of the history on that, but just to paint a bit of a picture relative to the west end of downtown, I think one of the questions too that came up was, will this new parking facility in conjunction with the condos support and facilitate the long-term parking needs for the downtown area? In 2014, what the city was seeing was a pretty significant parking pressure in this particular lot, recognizing there was an overwhelming demand for parking at the time, an interest in purchasing permits far beyond the number of spaces that we actually had in that lot. And so that demand at the time generated an interest to find someone who might be willing to construct a parking structure. And I think that essentially is when Mr. Dupar came forward, expressed his interest in constructing a parking structure in the future. And I think that's partly why we're here today.
So if there is no, problems with us delaying this decision for just one meeting, especially because of the climate and the snow absolutely got in the way of the Downtown Association being able to get all the feedback, I would support that we just postpone it just until next meeting so that there is a chance to be able to get the information and there is a chance to get more of this. Like I said, if there is nothing that you can see that would be harmed by us waiting, I would absolutely support the delay of this.
So, Madam Mayor, nothing relative to the city's schedule or interest in this project. I will say that Mr. Dupar is in the room. I don't want to put him on the spot, but should he choose to point out some schedule-related issues, I would certainly urge you to welcome him to do so, because I don't claim to know his detailed schedule at this time.
Yeah, Mr. Dupar, if you have any issues with that and would like to stand, or if you would prefer not to, that's okay. But if it's no problem, then if you can come to the mic. Sorry, just for the sake of recording and for the folks who are trying to listen to us that are not here.
Okay, well, I understand the concerns that were raised, and we're trying to move forward as quick as we can. So there's sort of we look at this thing as we're trying to accommodate the parking so that there isn't a loss of parking. There can't be. In fact, there should be more. I mean, that's how I look at it. But whatever else, structurally, I can guarantee you that, I personally am not going to build a building that, structural engineers haven't laid it all together correctly.
Right. So would there be any harm to you or to your program if we just delayed it until the next meeting so that the Downtown Association can complete its search of answers and questions from the neighbors? Would that be a problem?
No, I don't believe so, no. And I think everybody should be heard.
Thank you so much. All right, so now you guys want to move forward?
I want to talk about parking. Because there's a lot that we can do to address parking downtown other than count the number of parking stalls and time how long people stay in those parking stalls. It's kind of the best practices in parking is to make sure that 1 out of 7 parking spots is available in, say, a given block or a side of each block or whatever. So that's about 85% availability or unoccupied parking spot. And we have, I remember as a kid, we had parking meters and we actually paid downtown. We've moved away from that and now we manage parking by time limit. And the theory is, well, if you have to move your car, then that's going to ensure that there's available spots. But if we think about what we care about as people who park, we don't care how long that other spot's been full of a car. We just care if there's an open spot nearby. So let's manage to get enough unoccupied parking spots, which is basically 1 out of 7 spots in on a given area, so that people can find a spot to park if they want to. It doesn't matter if somebody else has been parked in another spot for a really long time or not, but that's how we're managing downtown. So we're thinking that the amount of time that somebody spends in a spot is a proxy for how available the spots are going to be. But I've heard a lot of stories about people who will then do the car shuffle, which has been well documented by researchers, where you get your break as an employee, you go out and you move your car, and then 2 hours later you go out and move your car. You move your car, and you're not, you're still taking up a spot, you're complying with the rule, and it's not making more spots available for customers. So there's a lot of questions about, well, how do you improve parking demand, and really, I mean, how we handle parking is so much of how we handle, the livability of the city. So it's a really important thing that we tackle as a community, which is why I want to talk about it more. So one of the best practices that people recommend is to charge for parking, and to charge it at a rate that ensures,
Yeah, well, it's part of the overall, and.
this is part of the conversation.
It is.
These are concerns raised by the Downtown Association.
And we're having a public hearing tonight about specific surplus. This is not surplus. And sir, if you could maybe add this to a future think tank agenda, but it's not open discussion time, I believe, Madam Mayor.
I will stop, but it's important that we have this conversation, and we need to have it with the whole community, and not just pretend like parking is not an issue, or pretend like we're dealing with it adequately as a community.
We just have an agenda to stick to, sir.
So, we will, hang on just a second. We will continue, I guess, addressing the surplus, but you're absolutely right that we need to have this conversation about parking. And so we will put it on a future agenda to make sure that we do have the chance to be able to discuss it.
And to be clear, the item that we're discussing isn't just surplus, it's a two-part recommendation from staff.
Right.
And the second part of that, I'm a little unclear what the motion would be for that second part. So I don't know if there's a way for us to move forward on this, but really it's kind of the second part depends on the surplusing. But I would totally support, moving forward with this as quickly as possible because I think it's a good development for downtown.
So, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, it's a recommendation, and I think the only thing on the agenda tonight is, are we going to surplus this property or not? Period. When staff makes a recommendation, we can choose to follow it, ignore it, or modify it. The point on the agenda tonight is, are we going to surplus this property? What happens after the property is surplus is that then becomes a sale issue, and that is something else that should be undertaken between the city manager and anybody who wants to buy the property. But the property can't be sold until we surplus it. The decision in my mind tonight is, do we surplus the property or not? I don't think we need to follow the rest of the recommendations of the staff if we do not choose to. And so let's stick to that, in my opinion. Decide whether we're going to surplus the property or not. The rest of it will follow in course, but the first step is to surplus the property. That makes it available for the rest of the discussion that we have.
Well, and I want to clarify because we do have two recommendations that were brought up. One's to staff, and the first one's to surplus it, and the second one is to whether we want to adopt the development proposal that was presented to us. And so that does agree, that's what supports the conversation about parking. That's the reason why I allowed that to a certain point, and I agree that I think need to put in the next agenda to go ahead and have that discussion on parking. So at this point, I think we all agreed that we wanted to go ahead and delay this decision until the following city council meeting so that the Downtown Association can have a chance to get their questions answered. Is that what I heard from in general?
I would be willing to support that.
Okay, so do we need a motion, or are you okay with just letting?
Madam Mayor, I would suggest that if that is your desire, that you make a motion to continue the public hearing to the March 5th regular city council meeting.
All right, do I hear a motion, Council?
I move the public hearing on surplusing of this parcel to the next council meeting.
All right.
Second.
So we got a motion on the table and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So it passes unanimously. All right, so with that, we've got two presentations. The first one will be the housing needs assessment, and the second will be the culinary resource. Is that what we were, Mr. West?
Madam Mayor, you could go either way, but I think what is most important is recognizing the significance of housing and that conversation. It's important we give ample time to that. So if you see a benefit to moving forward with the Marine Resource Committee presentation first, knowing that we would probably need less of a conversation following that.
Okay, I think that makes a wonderful sense. So if you guys can get ready to present, that would be wonderful.
Can I get the slide shown up, please? Thank you for having me here tonight. And thank you for not having me here last week. Appreciate that a lot. While she's getting going here, my name is Jeff Ward. I'm the chair of the Clallam Marine Resources Committee. And I'm also a retired scientist from the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. And I'm here tonight with my vice chair, Ed Bolby, who's right over there, and our project coordinator, Kelly Anderson, who's in the back row there. So a little bit earlier tonight, you had a presentation on human health, and I'm going to talk about environmental health. And I'll tell you a little story about the Clallam Marine Resources Committee. Back in the 1980s, 1990s, when I was a small child, a lot of people were concerned about the health of Puget Sound and the Sabre Sea. There was a lot of pollution, there was a lot of development going on, and it was important enough that Senator Patty Murray and Representative Jack Metcalf put together a blue ribbon panel to look at the issues confronting the Sound and to look for solutions. Now, back then, one of the ideas was to create what they call the Marine Protected Area. And you've heard of these before. There are protected areas that are overseen by the federal government. And that didn't work well in the Pacific Northwest. People wanted to see local control over issues and challenges. And so the committee was called the Murray Metcalf Commission, studied the problem, and they wrote a report. And what they wrote in their report, get this to work.
I think he was talking about the arrow.
Yeah, I'm going to get there in a second. The words that they used in the report was, they concluded that a coordinated effort blending well-founded science with grassroots consensus building would be the best approach. And so what happened was the Northwest Straits Marine Conservation Initiative was created in 1998 and authorized by Congress. And the marching orders for the initiative were really two things. One of them was to protect and restore the waters of the Northwest Straits. And the other one was to do this through citizen-based involvement. The way that we looked at it was bottom-up environmental resource management. And a tagline that we've used for a lot of years is local people, local solutions. So there's three components to the initiative. The first one was the kind of quasi-governmental entity called the Northwest Straits Commission, which operates within the Department of Ecology. We also stood up a Northwest Straits Foundation, which was a 401c3 that could take donations from individuals, corporations, or other non-governmental organizations, and funnel that money into the Marine Resource Committees to do the work. If you look at the arrows, those are there intentionally, because the way this works is ideas flow both directions. They flow from the commission and the foundation down to the Marine Resources Committees, and they flow up to inform both of those organizations with local people telling them what we need to do. Perfect example of this One of the biggest projects that the Northwest Straits Initiative's ever had was a derelict gear removal program that was established about 12 years ago to remove lost fishing nets and crab pots from the waters of the Salish Sea. In the last 10 years, we've removed thousands of nets and thousands of crab pots. The idea for that program started in Clallam County. The Marine Resources Committee suggested the idea. It went up through the Foundation and Commission, and it became a program that's still going. It's been recognized nationally, and it's been recognized internationally as a really effective way to deal with marine pollution. The 5 counties that are involved in Northwest Straits, I don't have to remember them now because they're on the slide. The Whatcom is Canadian border all the way down to Snohomish County on the east side. Island, Jefferson, Clallam, and Santa Barbara. We have Marine Resources Committees in all 7 counties. The Clallam Group is celebrating its 20th year of existence, which is pretty amazing. Think about how far we've come. We just created a brand new strategic plan, which was a lot of fun. Everyone enjoyed it. No, they didn't. They hated it. The vision is really what the initiative is all about. We want to protect the beauty and the resources that we have here for our children and our grandchildren. And the plan actually talks about 3 goals. One of them involves protection and restoration. Another one is to collect information and use science to support decision making. And the third one is really about reaching out to the public, educating and engaging the community. We also do a lot with student interns to train our replacements. And I'm going to show you some pictures of the things we do regarding those goals in a minute. Just forgot about this. Here's a picture of some of the members of the committee. There's a couple of faces there I think you'll recognize. Mayor Rush is your representative on the Clallam MRC. Councilman Moran is the alternate. We really appreciate you guys being at the table. It's brought a lot of energy and ideas to the committee. I circled the 2 at the top there. Ed Bolby and Lynn Minch was a longtime employee of the Jamestown tribe. They are legacy members. They were there 20 years ago when this started. And so we have them as history. They help us with the institutional knowledge and often say, yeah, we did that in 1999. The membership really reflects kind of a cross-section of Clallam County. We have a member for each of the 3 commissioners. We have a member of the board, cities of Port Angeles and Sequim. The 3 treaty tribes along the strait sit at the table with us. And we have a series of members that represent different aspects of community here, whether it's development or marine trades or academic community. It's a really diverse group of people. They bring a lot of different skill sets and experiences to the table. And it's a lot of fun to work with these people. Some of the things we've learned over the last 20 years is this bottom-up, place-based thinking really works. You can do a lot when local people get involved in local projects. You've got to have partnerships. Partnerships help you stretch the money. They create opportunities for making the tent bigger. You've got to do education and engagement, whatever you can, however you can, to get people involved in the work you do. And sort of a no-brainer is when you collect good information on the environment, you make better decisions and you have less uncertainty about what you do. And I've learned that after 40 years of work in the environmental field. Good baseline data is really hard to find, and it's really important to have it. And then the other thing to think about is you can't just do the science. You have to include environmental, socioeconomic, and cultural aspects in decisions, and you make better decisions when you think about those things as a whole. And it's hard to do, but it's really important. So here's some examples of the work we do. We've worked for a number of years with the Jamestown tribe to restore the native Olympia oyster to some of their tidelands. This is an oyster, it's only about that big, but it was outcompeted a number of years ago with the introduction of the big oysters that you see, and also was affected by marine pollution and development. So as of now, we have about 2 acres of tidelands that have Olympia oysters on them. 5 years ago, there were 0. We also do hazardous waste operations training. It's called HAZWOPER. You'll notice where we do it is right here. This is a program that it's an 8-hour program that allows local people to be trained to volunteer if there's an oil spill. You have to have the training in order to do it, and it's really a fun thing to do. I was just looking up here. The next training is going to be March 2nd, which is a Saturday, in this building. So go to our website, clowncounty.mrc.org, and you can sign up for that training. We also do another kind of training that teaches people how to work with oil wildlife and assist professionals if there's an oil spill. Who was here in 1985 when there was an oil spill in Port Angeles? Anybody? Over 200,000 gallons of crude oil was spilled during the Arco Anchorage spill, and thousands of birds were covered with oil. If that ever happens again, and we hope it won't, these kind of training sessions allow you to learn how to work with the animals and help the professionals. And that training is going to occur April 27th at the Pioneer Park and Swim. And again, you can go to our website and look it up. We also work with Recreational Crabbers. We have a program called Catch More Crab. And one of the ways you catch more crab is to lose fewer pots. We have an internship program, and we go out and do outreach to crabbers. We teach them about where to put the pots, how to use them so they can recover the pots. It's been a great program. We have a new one that's rolling out now. It's a grant from NOAA. It's a 3-year program to do crab pot removals and public outreach, and you'll see that this spring. In 2013, the Northwest Race Foundation removed 104 crab pots from Dungeness Bay. It was a removal effort that took 4 days. All of those pots had crab in them. They were all lost primarily by recreational crabbers. So this has been a good program for the interns because it gives them a chance to work with the public. We also go out to Pillar Point, west of Port Angeles, in the spring and the summertime, and we collect shellfish twice a month and ship them to the Department of Health lab in Olympia, and they test for PSP, paralytic shellfish poisoning. And if they come back clean, they can keep those beaches open. If they don't get the samples and there's nobody doing it, they close the beach. So that's one of our other projects. This is the one that the students all want to do. It's a kelp-based or a kayak-based kelp survey. We have students and MRC members in kayaks that go out on the perimeter of kelp beds with a handheld GPS, and they map the extent of the beds, and they also look at the species of kelp that occur there. And we have now 3 years of data at Freshwater Bay and Clown Bay. We're looking at the status and trends of kelp, which is a habitat for a variety of fish and marine mammals. Ed Wolbe instituted a seabird survey, I think it was 4 years ago, and we study pigeon guillemots, which are a bird that occurs along the beaches, and they nest in the cliff faces along the strait. We study the number of young they produce. We look at what they feed their young, and we count them as part of a census with this is a partnership with the local Audubon group, which has been really, really good. And so anybody can do this. We'll have a training session this spring if you'd like to help us. Spend 1 hour a week on a beach counting birds. It's a pretty good life. It's a lot of fun. If you've been to the Dungeness River Festival, you've seen us there. This is Alan Clark and Ed are showing the school kids gooey duck clam. That kid is air kissing the gooey duck. That's one of our. We didn't want them to, make physical contact, so they air kiss. We talk about why these animals need clean water. We talk about why it's important to not pollute, because if you do, these animals will either die or they won't be able to be used for food. And what happens with the Dungeness River Festival is the kids usually come on a Friday, and the next day they bring their parents. And then we talk to the parents too. And they've usually gotten an earful from the kids, so it's a really good educational experience. This is a beach cleanup at the Elwha Beach down on Place Road. We also do a coastal beach cleanup during Earth Day we support. And this was a cleanup after the 4th of July. We had people out there for a number of years now looking at the beach and understanding how to treat it with respect so that it continues to be a place where you can go and have fun. Now, before I close, I want to talk about how we pay for this. Over the last 20 years, the Clown MRC has brought in over $1.4 million to Clown County to support the programs and the internships that I've shown you in the slides. The 56% of the money comes from Northwest Straits Commission through EPA grant, and about 44% has come directly from the state of Washington as part of their biennial budget. The state money is going to run out on the 30th of June. And what we've been doing is working with the Clown Board of Commissioners to create a letter to be submitted to Representatives Chapman and Theringer and State Senator Vanderweg, asking them to continue to include us in the state budget. And tonight I would ask the council, if you can help us with this, it would be much appreciated. We do have a copy of the letter that we created for the commissioners that could be repurposed for the council. When community leaders and groups send this kind of input to Olympia, it does matter. And it shows that the councils and the cities and the commissioners are behind the work. It really would be a good thing to do that. So I'll stop now and take questions if you have time.
Any questions, Councilman? And I just want to pipe in that as the representative to this committee, they do some amazing work, and they've got some really, really dedicated members, and it is making a difference in our water out there, in our beaches, and the counts, that the information that is gathered is being really useful. So I know everybody got a copy of that in front of them as to the letter, so we know they're going to make the decision, the budget decision. Do we know when the budget decision is happening? And whether we want to go ahead and make a decision to support this today, or we want to put this on your agenda to support this, or to at least have the discussion. How would you guys like to move forward?
I think staff MOB is fairly time sensitive, so I move that the city draft a letter in support of the Collin County Resource Committee.
Second. All right, council, we have a motion on the table. Any further discussion on this?
I would say that us supporting this organization fits very nicely in a very concrete way with the AWC, one of the AWC legislative parties that I can't remember right now that we were going to talk about supporting, or that we did say we were supporting. And I think it's really important for us to support the continued work of this organization particularly. Well, I just think it is. That's what I'm going to say.
Any further discussion? All right, folks, we've got a motion on the table in a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously, so we will be pending the letter.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. All right, it is 7:30. I know up next will be the housing assessment presentation. Do we want to take a 2-minute break? Okay, so be back here in 5 minutes. All right, well, I guess we can, I don't know where Jim is gone, but we can, we've got a housing assessment, so Ms. Clarkey, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to introduce Tom Beckwith. Tom is the owner of Beckwith Consulting, and that they were appointed by the city to lead our housing needs assessment effort. This has been an effort that's been going on for the last about 4 or 5 months. Tom tonight, and first of all, I just want to thank the council for being understanding with the need to reschedule his presentation for the last council meeting due to the weather. But we are excited to hear from Tom tonight. Tom's going to lead through essentially helping you, the council, as well as the public, understand what we have done up to this point, and then steps that we are really in the process of taking to finalize our housing action plan. It is the intent of the city to incorporate our housing action plan into our housing element of the city's comprehensive plan. We are in the process of doing a 2019 annual amendment cycle, so we see that effort coordinated and working together. I'm going to really leave it there. I would ask if we could save our questions maybe for the end of the presentation. Of course, there's something that you just don't want to forget to ask, go ahead. But then Tom will do his best to answer questions, and I post them available as well.
Can you hear me? I talk very loud, so I'll try to stand as far back as I can. I understand there's a couple of you who saw the presentation for SWAM. Which ones? Okay. A lot of the statistics that we're looking here are the same as you saw in SWIM. They're just Port Angeles and East Port Angeles. So to some extent, it'll be a little bit repetitive, but then you'll see as we continue to progress through it, we're going to get much more specific about actions and policies and strategies for Port Angeles. This is our work program. We had 5 key tasks. This is the team that we worked on. These are the weeks we are. This is our budget. This line represents where we are now. So we're developing the action plan, policies and strategies and so on polishing those up. We've gathered a lot of background data. We've met with a working group composed of about 9 people, 3-4 times, going over what some of the information in this is. So we're confident we have enough base information. The key issue is to separate those down into workable strategies which are pertinent to you. These are some of the background. It will first of all take a look at population projections. You're a growth management area, so the state does countywide projections they used to do them every 5 years, now they do them as budget allows, but these are the ones from 2017. You can see the population projection for Clallam County that starts in 1900, and you can see why there's a growth factor there, and I'll cover why. It's kind of modest as far as the county is concerned. The projections for you were in the county's comprehensive plan some 9-10 years ago, I guess, at the first time that the state allocated your population. Between you and Spring, that's where all that growth was projected to occur. So that's a steeper rise than what we really think is going to be typical when the comp plan is updated.
Tom, my apologies. Can you go back to the last slide? And I couldn't read the numbers on the X or Y axis, but where are we now and when does it get a lot steeper at the end of the plan?
You're a little below 20,000 right now. And if you were to grow at the projections that the state gave to the county and the county gave to you, you'd be under 35,000 by 2050. 2050 is the far point column. But you can see the projection presumes from 2020 on where that bulk of that growth is going to happen. But as I said, that was in the first county comprehensive plan. And all the growth at that time was allocated just to Yokosuka. Now, what's more interesting is why that growth is going to occur. When the state does the projections, they look at your birth, your death, and they look at your migration rates and look at all the counties throughout the state. They take a look at what the trends are, and then they try to portion out if those trends continue within reason, what would amount to. So you're reading from the bottom of the chart here up. This is the decade 1960 to 1965. This is the decade 1935 to 1940. The red are deaths. You see how many deaths are going to start occurring as you age? That's age implication. The blue are births. You can see your birth numbers that stay relatively consistent through that period of time. The green is migration. You had a big surge in migration from 75 to 80, but after that you can see they're relatively stable. So you're creating babies and you're bringing people in, but your deaths are what's keeping you at modest growth. And you're not unique. That's the aging of the population, and in your case, it's the aging of the specific population that's within the county if that continues. On the left is your county age distribution 2010 to 2050. This is both sexes, and usually when you talk about the population pyramid, you would have the greatest numbers here, and this would be males, and over here would be females. But if we put them together, it really should be a triangle. Before the war, it would be pretty much apportioned. You'd have a large number of births, and as you progress through the different ages, they gradually decline to nothing. But you can see partially the impact of the baby boom, or all of it somewhere within that boom. But the issue is it is repeated, and even more so, you can see what's happening up in here by the aging of the population, almost beyond what early projections anticipated. The key question is look at the blue, that's 2010. Look at the red, that's their latest projection for 2050. The very top bar is 85 plus. To give you an idea, my father-in-law died 2 years ago at 92. My father died at 100. That's going to be typical of what we're progressing to. On the right is an attempt to give you some idea of what your age-specific projections would be 2010 to 2050. The red is 2050, and the blue is 2010. Now to come up with these projections, we just presume you'll retain the same attraction for every age group that you currently have now in the county. So if the county projections are good through 2050 and every year in there, and you retain the same attraction rate, then this is what you would look like. And you can see in some respects, You do have some burst and some young people down in this age group, but you can see where the growth's going to occur within the future. When we wanted to have a little bit more social economic statistics, we went to the Bureau of the Census, and they do the American Community Survey. It's called the ACS survey, and they try to fill in the years between the every 10-year decadal Bureau of the Census survey. And what they do is a statistical sample, and they put together 5 years of that, and then they get a profile, and then of course every year they do another sample, and they drop a year, and they add a year. The numbers I'm going to show you are from 2013 to 2017, even though I haven't changed the source dates on the charts yet. So it's the most recent information we can get. They do them for all jurisdictions or places. So the data is good for Clallam County, for Port Angeles, and for East Port Angeles. And these are the mapped areas generally that those information coincides with. This is the age distribution. The only thing added here in 2016 based on their data, it's really 2017 as I said, I just haven't changed the chart, is the green is the city of Port Angeles, the red is East Port Angeles, and the blue is Clallam County. And if you look at the difference between the red and the green, you can see that in some respects, the East Port Angeles is a little more, quote, suburban, a little bit more middle family, and you'll see in the characteristics a little bit more suburban middle family, whereas the green, which is Port Angeles itself, reflects more of a balanced, if you might call it, age community in 2017. Then we looked at some statistics. The 10 tables that will be in the report, statistics and so on, and what I've just done is pull out some indicator tables. And I compared you first off with the U.S. This would be the U.S. bar every time. This is the state of Washington every time. This is Puget Sound, that's Kitsap, Kings, Pierce, and Snohomish counties because that's the most urban piece of the state. This is Clallam County, Port Angeles, East Port Angeles. So if we're looking at average household size, I said this was a typical kind of suburban profile of East Port Angeles, but you can see within the city itself, and even in the county, smaller household sizes. Part of that is age characteristic. If you look at median age, you can see the median age in Clallam County. You're probably somewhat typical of Puget Sound, but you can see it's a little older, even though it's a little bit more what we call suburban at East. If you look at the percent 65 plus, you can see the differences here with the rest of the state. In Clallam County in particular, an older profile even than in Sequim and Port Angeles. If we look at the percent family, households and families, again you can see the East versus the city. These bars sometimes get a little bit more relative. The differences may be slight. In some cases it's going to be bigger. So you got to kind of look at the percent per se on each chart. This is female-headed households. This is, you can see quite a bit of difference here in the city as compared to East and even as compared to Clallam County. So your population, your households, your characteristics are a little bit more female-headed, and that means that there's only one person that's heading up that household, and that's a woman. Non-family households living alone, your profile shows a little bit more. The blue is living, the biggest chart is living alone, and then this is living alone over 65. So you have a lot of, quote, younger and middle that are living alone, and I'll show you some national trends later on. That's one of the biggest trends affecting housing. It's affecting more than just housing, it's affecting almost societal changes. And the bottom is resided in the same house 1 year ago, and you can see how stable these populations are compared to the rest, but even less so in your city limits. But then you do have a Coast Guard contingent here, and there is rotation. Even so, even accounting for that, you have a much more stable population than we would expect. But sometimes that's good and bad. Sometimes that may be the age and they're retiring here. Sometimes it may mean that economic conditions trap you here. If you look at Grace Harbor, there'd be a good percent of that population that's, quote, trapped, because once the job base changed and they couldn't adapt to that job base change, or they couldn't bring in jobs that reflected that, they tended to stay because it didn't have many choices about leaving.
Can you go back to that last graph at the bottom? So if I understand it correctly, Port Angeles What's the percentage there?
80%. Are you talking about this one?
Yeah.
80%. Resided in the same house.
Oh, gotcha. I'm not seeing the scale. So that's between 70. The axis doesn't go from 0 at the bottom. Gotcha. Sorry.
Percent civilian employed in the labor force. This shows the impact of Coast Guard, the National Park Service, and so on. Percent employed in base versus service industries. Base industries are those that are considered product or resource oriented. So you're looking at forestry, fisheries, agriculture, but it also includes a base amount of manufacturing. And the concept behind base is you're producing the goods that you sell out of the area, which gives you the reason for being. Service industries are everything else that it takes to support you: retail, wholesale, transportation, education, government, recreation, so on. And you can see your concentration is primarily within the city, at least, in service industries. But then you're also a county courthouse. You also have probably the major educational, major hospital and medical services. And so part of that reflects your specialization. The only issue on the base side is it's related to the service. So if you have one person employed in agriculture and they're the key base, then the service employment is related to how that base person. And the ratio is usually about 1 to 8 by the time you ripple through, as it's called. But then service people have to be supported and the ripple continues. In the 60s, when Boeing shut down, the ripple should have gone the other way. If you take away that base employee, it should collapse. People didn't leave. They just found other occupations and found other ways of staying put because they lacked the place. And so what we're seeing more recent in economic theory is the question, do you want to live there? If you want to live there, you'll find an occupation or you'll find some way to sustain yourself. As opposed to, at early time will be sustain yourself first, regardless of what the character of the area was. Workers in government, and this is where you're going to see the Coast Guard and the National Park Service and so on. Workers which are private wage and salary is a reflection of that. But this is usually the more interesting, how many which are entrepreneurial, percent employed in their own business. And those are slight percentages, but you're still higher than, say, the rest of the state and even on Puget Sound. More so if you're in a proportional sense in the county, because you're still a significant place of job creation. Mean travel time in minutes, I imaged this, 21 minutes, that's very short. I live in the corner, it's even shorter once we get around the tractors and the animals. And no vehicles available in the household. Now you can see this impact here, that's about 11% within the city. Part of that is a reflection of age, young and old. And that does affect housing, and it will affect housing not only in the needs for housing, but it can also affect the characteristics of the housing, like how many parking spaces do you need, and how do you relate to transit, and how is transit related to jobs, and so on. Median family income, yours is lower, even somewhat comparable more into these areas, but it's still lower. Part of that is the nature of the type of industries you have here, but also a certain part of that is the nature of the kinds of families you have here. They're a little older, and just, as I said, there's more of a concentration of other types of households. Then you can see that it's somewhat adjusted if we look at just per capita, but it's still lower. It reflects more a rural characteristic than the urban characteristic. That's not necessarily bad, it's just the nature of the area. The percent of population in poverty, however, you can see 22% of your population qualifies. And that very definitely affects your capabilities on housing. Total families in poverty, that's about 15%. You're still much, much higher than other areas. And we'll see that age is a big factor of that. Percent of detached single-family units, you're still predominantly single-family, almost 10 points higher than every other area. Percent of multifamily, you're lower, at least in county, and almost non-existent in the east. Your 8% is still lower for what we might call higher density housing. Your median house value is more typical of the nation, and you can see these areas. And then your median rents for the same characteristics. So in some respect, income affects your ability to buy or rent, but also what is available to buy or rent is affected by the ability to pay, so the market adjusts to some extent. Percent owner occupied, you can see it's less here compared to this area, much higher in the east. Percent renter occupied, you're more of a renter characteristic, but this is the one we really want to look at. What percent of income is paid for housing? Now, if you went to the bank, they would use 30% of gross, but they're looking at mortgage and interest and those types of things. If you look at HUD, it says what is the total occupancy cost, so what's utilities, what's everything else that's involved with that. Then increasingly, we start to look at what's the cost of transportation in relation to housing. This does not include transportation, it includes all those other factors. You can see the owners are in the blue, the percent that are paying over 35%, and it's somewhat more, you're more typical of the region and the state for that. You're about 26% of all of your owners. And if you look at your renters, you're about 45%, which you're pushing the boundaries, but not extremely different than other areas. Now, when they say income, they don't mean assets. They mean income, meaning maybe wages or salaries or interests or whatever, or pensions. So there may be people who pay more than 35%, but have lots of assets. Language other than English and race. You are predominantly a Caucasian area that speaks English, which is somewhat atypical from what's happening in the rest of the state. But part of that is the Hispanic populations are migrating where there's agriculture, construction, and healthcare. And particularly those that speak languages other than even Spanish or English are following certain kinds of occupations, and those occupations and industries are not dominant here, at least not yet. Now, the information that comes in these charts is from the Washington Center for Real Estate Research. For a long number of years, this was a research data gathering done by Washington State University, and about 5 years ago it transferred to the University of Washington and is shared with the Runstead Center on Development. So the first chart, and one of the limitations of this is they only collect it to the county level. They don't go beyond the county level. Most of it is collected either on multi-lists or on assessor sales or on building permit data. So very quickly, you can see in the top left, average apartment rents, that should be through 2017, they're going up. Red is Puget Sound, blue is the state. You can see in the next one on the top right, median home prices, they're going up. But here we do have the county, you can see it's your green. And you can see your increases of not going up anything like what's happening in the more urban areas. In the bottom left, we're looking at percent of housing stock added each year. You can see that you're there, you are adding, but not at the rates that these other areas are doing. And the percent that is sold each year, turned over, you can see that you're probably more typical there in the green bars than you can see the others. You can also see the impacts of the housing boom and bust. The boom occurred around 2003 to about 2006, and you can see the bust started in 2009 and so on. So in some respects, the recovery has been very, very gradual in certain areas. But in Seattle, it's been almost dynamic up and down. At one time, Seattle was the hottest real estate market in the nation. The prices of the value of property was going up. But then within the last year, the prices in King County, for example, dropped about 17%. So there are a lot of fluctuations going on. Not necessarily, you're more stable in those other areas, but the question would be what the future is. And part of that is the ability to house people. We'll get into that in a few minutes. One of the things they do rate is a housing affordability index. So what they do is they determine the average price of housing that's occurring new and used within each market area. And they look at what it would take for a typical mortgage to be able to buy or rent that product, and then they take a look at what the average homeowner is able to pay. The yellow is 100% equalization between your income and your ability to pay and what the market was providing. That means you'd be perfect. If it goes above that bar, then we have a problem. The product is more expensive than what people could pay. And if you look at housing affordability index overall, and Clallam County is red, and the numbers for you started in 2006, you're above that bar. You can see where the bubble and the bust happened. but you're still above that bar, but you're getting much closer. The one on the right is first-time buyer. So they take those who are out actively trying to buy, never have done it before. These are typically young couples or even young individuals. And you can see your red bar is considerably higher than that. And that means the product that's being brought to market is not something a first-time buyer can afford, significantly so. This data is from your own internal, and by the way, I said the Center for Real Estate Research doesn't go beyond the county level. That's all that it does. But this is your local data. In the top left bar, look at the light blue. That's residential building permits. And you can see that goes up and down, but it hasn't fluctuated dramatically until about 2016. And then you can see that light blue bar's gotten bigger. On the one on the top right, look at multifamily. That's the little red bar there. And you see between 2002 2007, that's about it for multifamily permits. This is permits, not construction or occupancy. Now let's take a look at some wages. This is Washington State versus Collin County. Washington State is blue, you're red. You can see that the state average hourly wage is going up. This should be, is going up, but you can see while you're going up, you're not going up at the same rate. Part of that is the difference between urban and rural, and part of that is the difference between high-tech and traditional industries. We did want to look at average wages of critical occupations, and this is from the Washington State Employment Security Department. They do take certain occupations and determine what the average wage is, but they only report them for metropolitan statistical areas. They don't report them at the county level, so I can't show you what these occupations would be at the county level. And unfortunately, the closest, quote, metropolitan statistical area for you, you have to have some water to keep repeating that, is Bremerton and Silverdale, which are not typical of what you should expect here. So these are a little bit inflated. This is your county average, county average, county average. This is for a firefighter, a policeman, a teacher, healthcare worker, an accountant, a carpenter, retail salesperson, and a food preparation worker. You can see then we took, while those are the average wages, then we took and put in our house purchasing capability and compared that with Collin County across the board. You can see the ones that are less than you are the ones within these service categories, retail sales, food preparation, and at the very last one is your median house value. This is if one person worked. And if you can imagine in the retail sales, the food preparation, one person is not going to be able to sustain housing. It's going to take two, or a person working two jobs. And this is the same in the rental capability. And as I said, I think these numbers are a little more optimistic than they should be if we had actual wage scales for these occupations here. This is important, usually in two reasons. If we have what I would consider a little bit more accurate data, the question would be, can you sustain yourself? Can the people that you need to operate the city and operate your community, can they live here? And if they can't live here, then you have to consider, can you import them? And if you can't import them, then the question is, where are you going to begin to have severe problems? And my example story is my parents retired in Jodel Webb community in Southern California. And every morning there are buses that come into that community to bring everybody that does all the services within that community. They're the ones that do the health care, that do the care, that do the food, that maintain the lawns, that do the construction work, that do everything. And they come from a distance. At one time, when we began to have high fuel costs and fuel shortages, if those people didn't come, that community would be in big trouble. Because there's nowhere within at least 50 miles that those people could be found because they don't live there. Now the downside even on the workers is if they can't come, they can't get paid. But it shows you what happens when you disassociate critical skills and supportive skills from your ability to live in your community. This is the home purchasing capability based on what that data is. This is your average income level within the county. And at this point, you can't afford, you see the blue bars? You can't afford to buy those housing products. So the point is, what is that number right there? And purchasing capability in this county would be $40,000. So you have to make $40,000 to buy the average house on the new and used within the county. And if you're looking at the same thing on the rental market, then you need to make about $35,000 to be able to rent the average unit within the county. And if I went back to the food and the healthcare and so on, you would see you're not there. But for some reason, I repeated, that was such a good argument that I repeated those slides. Now, one other thing that we look at is homeless count. And in recent years, the state has done this now. It's gone to the Department of Commerce. And their counts don't go as detailed as we used to do when we got to the county level, and it was done at the county level. But I put 4 charts in here because I thought these were the most useful. The left ones, the ones on the left are the state, the ones on the right are Clallam County. On the top left, blue are sheltered households. Those are households that have a place to live. The red are unsheltered. And you can see by 2016, the unsheltered started to climb again. If you look at where they were closest, it was around 2013. We were getting relatively close statewide to being able to shelter homeless. If you look at you can also see that the red is starting to increase. And the out year, the anomaly there is 2015, where you see that sharp drop. And we've been told that that was a problem in the way it was collected within the county at that time. And the bottom left is the difference between types of households. So it's blue, it's households with children. If it's red, it's households without children. And you can see that the blue was doing pretty good until 2016. We were housing families, and then all of a sudden our supply began to drop. A lot of the organizations that were doing that work were either unable to finance themselves or unable to provide for those kinds of households. Now, the very green at the very top, you can barely see that, those are children, unaccompanied children. There's one elementary school in Tacoma that about 60% of their students are homeless children. And their programs include lunches, the lunches that go home on the weekends. They can stay overnight if they have to in the school. And they have a very, very aggressive social outreach program for the parents.
I don't understand unaccompanied children. Wouldn't they be in foster care?
Not necessarily. And they count children as 16 and under. Your statistics, you can barely see the green line for you. There's only one person in 2018 for you. So you kind of, and the question there is, how do we count those? So the point in time is to go and try to count people usually wherever they are. What we don't usually be able to capture are those that are couch surfing or those that are living with somebody on a temporary basis. They're not quite on the street yet, but they're not really in what we would call a home. So I think that our youth are undercounted.
Just want to ask, if we had a 20-year time set there rather than an 8-year time set, would it look like we're doing better than, say, 2005? And I realize that is on a before.
Oh, go back, further back in time?
Right, because there's so much fluctuation during the 2000s. And
when the state took over managing the data, they changed the definitions a bit. And so, and that's frustrating because, for example, when we were done at some county levels, they went into who are they? Are they veterans? Are they mentally ill? Are they on addictions and so on? And I think the state, as it did that, it may have some of that specific for certain counties, but they tried to come up with a uniform way of measuring things across the state. Because when we began to look at what the reasons were, you began to see veterans, addictions, mental illness, a lot of other reasons that almost became chronic homeless. And that's a different kind of requirement than you might call somebody lost a job and lost a house and so on. Those that lost a job for economic reasons or even for abuse were doing a better job than the what you might call the habitual homeless. Programs for the habitual homeless are different. Portland has been experimenting a lot with that, with what they call alcoholic addiction. They looked at what was the best way to treat them as far as housing. It always used to be clean up your act and we'll put you in a house. And they went the other way. They said, we'll put you in a house and we'll see if you can clean up your act. And the reason they did that is they looked at the cost of what it was taking for them to pick them up off the street, take them to the ER, take them back, what was the cost of policing for all that. And they found it was significantly less than providing them housing. They also found that housing was really the key to treatment more than anything else. Once they were in a safe place that was warm and they were able to get food, the improvement was much better than the traditional way of treating them at the ER and in jail. So there's a lot of experimentation going on in that, and I think that some of it is pretty productive, but it's almost counterintuitive from what we used to think.
Just a quick question, if you don't mind. That's very interesting. Take that to our situation, though. What you're saying is we have a housing shortage, basically. So, where do we put these people then? If we want to go towards demonstrating in Portland?
Portland actually bought a hotel and tried that for the alcoholic addictions. King County looked at mobile home parks. They were looking at the aging mobile home parks and said that's one of the lowest cost housing we have. So they began buying those, and that's one source of low income households. Some are looking at tiny homes. Some are looking at still the camps, which seem to be the least productive. So everybody's experimenting with different things. The issue is who are you trying to serve, and how big is the population you're trying to serve, and how does it fit the area that you're in. Most of what you saw when I said shelter, those were shelters. They were not the kind of examples I was saying in Portland. They're counted differently. It's not something we've answered yet. I think it's something that has a big problem. In fact, if you drive I-5 through Seattle, you can see them everywhere under the freeway. And it comes and goes depending on the weather, it comes and goes depending on economic conditions.
Just to clarify, you mean, is it housing first as a principle for addressing homelessness that we haven't mentioned yet, or is it what do we do given that we want to work within a housing first model?
Housing first works for certain kinds of homeless, and you can't assume that they're all the same. They're just not. The program that Portland's playing with was alcohol. But if you're looking at mental illness, that's a whole different animal. That's treatment facilities and so on. And some of those that have been most proactive in that are the tribes, because they're there and there are manageable numbers and so on. If you're looking at domestic abuse, which is also a factor in homeless, that's a different kind of animal to deal with. If you're looking at veterans, some of them are addicted and some of them are mentally ill, but they're almost an entirely different subset of that. So it's hard to say that there's one program that meets all. They're not the same kind of person. Does that make sense? And in a volume, they're easier to come up with solutions than when they're down to the size that you're dealing with. Just to the numbers and what's probably the diversity of the numbers that you're seeing as you encounter them. Now I'm going to give you some national trends and we'll talk about some of the policy implications. This is from 19,000 to 2010. This is a special report that the Bureau of Census put out just to show what's going on in a big picture sense. And one of this was the percent of the population over age 65, and you can see what's happening here. And what it doesn't do is do the projections. If we're looking at the world scene, we'd be looking at Japan. The number of people in Japan that are working are there not enough of them to sustain the population now in Japan, and their concern is that within the next 20 years that non-working dependent population will be so large that the question to Japan is can they survive? We're only 20 years behind that scale if that's the way it goes. And so one of the issues is, where do you get the workers to replace the people that are retiring? And we're seeing that even in, say, San Juan County. The workforce there is retired, and there aren't enough young people interested in coming to the counties to do that. Immigration is one source. And some countries are more amenable to that than others, and it does affect their long-term projections. The second is percent of households rent or occupy. We used to presume, and even during that kind of fueled the housing boom to a certain extent, was the idea that that was your best investment. Own the house and that was kind of your source of wealth or your source of security. But increasingly, millennials don't want to own. And increasingly, when the job market is such as it is, you may move to the point where buying a house can actually be a disadvantage to you. I think the average, if you've seen the commercial, the average household over its lifetime will move 11 times in the United States. Not necessarily big migrations, but even within the same community. So mobility, sometimes homeownership does not improve mobility. And the example I gave in Grace Harbor, when economics changed and people were trapped. So you can see that some of the assumptions about whether you should own or rent are also changing. The next is the type of households by type. Blue is a traditional nuclear family, 2 adults, a man and woman, with kids. But you can see all the other bars are the ones that are increasing. An increasing percent are those that, on this chart, are one-person households that choose to live alone. And I'm not in here, blue is increasingly also cohabitating. Census doesn't care whether there's a marriage license or not. The question is there a man, a woman, or 2 men or 2 women, and kids? And it doesn't matter here, that blue bar is declining. And that also affects the housing market because increasingly this is what we've built for. And not only can these households not buy that, but they may not need it or want it. So before I go beyond that, and I think I described this at Square Mart, I tried to say there's 2 policies as to how to deal with an aging population and their housing issues. One is the concept of age in place. You stay in your house, and as you age and you're not working anymore, but you can't necessarily get to the market, you can't get to the social activities, you can't get to other things, the concept there is we'll bring those services to you. So Meals on Wheels, and you can see in the transit system that order in the bus when you want, and then that takes you where these other things are. That is very expensive. And particularly in a rural area or a dispersed area, you pay a lot of money just to get people to wherever their source of satisfying them, let alone what it costs to satisfy them or serve them. The other side of that is age transitional housing. So as you age and your needs change and your lifestyle changes, then you move into a housing or even a community that better fits wherever you are at that point in time. So that you can see why the 55 plus communities, and you can see why different housing types are being built, because that's the biggest market that's starting to mature. And the question is, are you providing those choices? There's nothing wrong with either choice. I'm not saying one is good or bad, they just do have implications. The question is, are both available? And if you're only relying on one model, it can be a big problem. I think I said my father-in-law stayed in his house because he had no other choices, plus he was a very stubborn man. And my parents did all the transition in Southern California, but as they said, everybody that they depended upon had to be bussed in. So we need a more nuanced rather than just either or. Now, one thing we looked at when we did this kind of plan for Bellingham and Washington County was we wanted to look at what we could do to reduce the cost of housing. And we took one of their typical projects. So we're dealing with the built building and we're substituting things within that building. We're not changing the type of structure it is or the site or anything else. But we looked at, first off, was land trusts. If instead of selling the property, if they leased it 50 years or longer and set it at an affordable rent, and that was the whole idea, how much could we reduce the cost per unit? It was 4.7%. The next thing we looked at is what if we manufactured rather than stick built? And the key issue with manufactured units is it takes less time and therefore there's less construction costs, there's less financing costs and so on. And here was 9.9%. The next we said, well, what if we reduce the units, made them smaller? And in this case, we only reduced them from 1,100 square feet per unit to 700 square feet per unit. We've got more units in the structure, and therefore, that reduced the average cost per unit to 12.4%. Now, in today's market, 700 square feet is a big unit, but we only went to 700. And the last is, what if we deferred the permits and the fees, at least as Bellingham charged them? And if we did that, there was 10.5%. But if we did all those things together at the same time, we reduced the cost by 37.5%. Now, while this is very project and area specific, what we're really trying to say is there's no silver bullet. If you really want to reduce costs, you got to look at every single factor, and you got to look at the cumulative effect of every single factor. So in Bellingham, it was look at land trust plus manufactured, plus smaller units, plus deferred fees if we really got to make any inroads. Now, this analysis was done in 2008, and what I would say is that some of the things, particularly manufactured units and density size, have become even more paramount. So I'm going to show you some quick examples of 3 types of housing. These are called Katrina Colleges. When the Katrina hurricane was done, one of the challenges that some architects took up, including Brad Pitt, then he did competitions on just how fast could you produce a livable unit, and could it be developed within a quick period of time and put on site. And they called them Katrina houses. They're about 308 square feet, and they were able to be developed at about $55 a square foot. And you can see they're pretty mobile. You can build them off-site and move them in. But these are also ADUs. And Santa Cruz was looking at this, particularly how could they stimulate the development of ADUs, and so they went out and created a design manual and actually pre-designed, pre-planned what would be not only acceptable within their codes, they figured out how their codes were doing it, and then they made it available to anybody that wants to use it. The City of Seattle is doing the same thing. So the issue is they don't have to be, quote, stick-built on site. They can, and by the way, these Katrina Colleges at first, Lowe's sold them. You could buy them as a kit. And Lowe's would either provide you the materials and you built them, or Lowe's would actually come and put them on site. The next example are micro units. And micro units come in a number of different types, but the key issue in a micro unit is you reduce your unit down to your most basic needs. So you'll have a sleeping unit, you'll have a bathroom, you'll have a kitchenette, not a huge kitchen, but a kitchenette. And then everything else is communally shared in the larger units. If you want to play, or you want to have friends over, or you want to take the dog for a walk, that's done within the building itself. Now, there are different kinds. Congregate housing is more like a dormitory. And in that case, the kinds of activities you shared throughout the building might be common kitchens as well as a kitchenette. It might be meeting rooms, it might be work centers, it might be employment and so on. And they can get down to 140 to 200 square feet. And the last are small efficiency dwelling units. And they have a little bit more amenities into them, and they run around 220 square feet. This is the Seattle housing market. And at first it was being built for millennials that didn't want to buy. And they were being built off of transit lines so that they didn't have to provide parking within the walkable zones. And they were being then built as close as they could get in Fremont and Lake Union to be close to the high-tech employment centers. But then what we started to see is the average age of the occupants went up. It got to be single individuals that chose not to ever marry or cohabitate. And then the age began to get higher, and we got people who were empty nesters or not only empty nesters, but were then on their own, because these fit that lifestyle. Now, some of these got even smaller than this and were not well sited. They were put into residential neighborhoods, and they were not put on transit lines and so on. They were called pods to a certain extent, and that was one reason that Seattle said we got to manage this market, because they were dropped into areas that didn't have transit, but people brought their cars anyway, even though they didn't provide it. So while this is a different kind of product, should not be put everywhere, and you should keep in mind who you're providing them for. 80% of what's being built in Seattle is that kind of product. The last example I'm going to show you is modular construction. This is in Belltown in Seattle, and this was done in 3 months. These units are almost like container storage units. They're not, but they're kind of designed like that. You can see each one of those as an individual unit. It was built off-site. It was put on a platform. We call these platform buildings. So the lower levels there are retail fronting, and behind that are the parking decks. And then these units are stacked on top of that. And generally, that's about 5+ floors, so that even though it's quote stick-built modular, it sits on top of that concrete base, so it passes all the codes. The key here is they save between 15 and 20% over development cost because it's time savings. And then what they did is that's 49 residential units there. They have about 3,000 ground level retail, and then on the top of all these roofs are the amenities. So if you want to do cookout, you go to the roof. If you want to have a party, you go to the roof. If you want to walk your dog, you go to the roof. And the only question began to occur to the city of Seattle is, should those be public accessible recreation areas to meet that demand as well? Now, back to some of the priorities that would affect you. We did a survey at the very beginning of this process. We mailed a postcard to every residential address within the zip codes that encompass the city and East Port Angeles. There is some overlap that goes beyond, the postal codes go beyond your city limits, but about 98% or more were city people. And we had 656 completed. That's about 15% of every mailing address, and not every mailing address is necessarily residential. We did give them an incentive. If they did the survey, they had a free pass to the pool, and we'll do a lottery drawing of the 656 to be a $250 gift certificate credit card. Now, I put them in priority order. We asked them to rate these conditions, whether or not they agreed with these statements, and we did it lowest, low, medium, high, highest, and then we gave numbers to that. So lowest is a 1, and the highest was a 5. And then to keep things simple, then we just averaged all of those returns. And on the bottom right over there, you can see how we put those together. So we say if it's red, it's a high agreement with that statement. That means the average score was 3.61 to 5. That's a very high. That means almost the bulk of them said 4 or 5 or highest. In the very bottom were blue, low agreement, that was only 1 to 2.3. You can see these are all red and yellow and ranked in order. So the greatest statement where the biggest problems were young adults are increasingly unable to rent or buy an affordable living unit that is manageable with local entry-level job incomes. That was almost unanimous at 4.29, that everybody that took the survey said they're the most impacted. After that were single-headed families. After that were service workers, elderly adults, including single individuals, special populations, public workers, in-migrant households. And then we asked them just, in some of the yellow, we asked certain kinds of questions like, if you're an in-migrant household and moved to Port Angeles from higher-priced housing markets and with more cash, and they cash out or are willing to pay more, they're driving up your costs. And then investors, and then older retired adults. And last was my available housing choice. As a result of all the above, is it not what I really need or want? And that came in about 3.2. Now, I didn't do an exact comparison with Squim, but they did agree that young adults were their biggest priority. But they had greater emphasis on some of the workers, service workers, because they have a shortage of that kind of capability. Then we asked them some action tasks. We said, rate some of the things we could do. Now these came in at more moderate priorities, but they're pushing the kind of the higher limits at the top, and I ranked them. So number 1 would be encourage innovating housing products. That's a transition housing. The next was adopt low-impact, smart and green development. Then initiate a housing renovation loan program. And I might stop there and give some idea on that. we've usually assumed that the way to provide and meet the housing market was to build low-cost housing. But really, your first strategy should be to retain what you got. And if you have people who are aging in their houses, the problem is they begin to age past their physical capability of keeping it up, and then past their ability financially to keep it up. And then by the time it comes on the market, it's no longer usable. And if you're looking at that first-time buyer, nobody says that has to be a new house. And what they do have to trade on is sweat equity. So the key issue is can you keep that, your existing stock, in good enough shape that you can put it on the market for those who need that kind of housing to move into. And if you do that, one of the ways of doing that is taking out basically a lien. You come into a household that can't afford to do the maintenance or the repairs, you say, all right, we'll loan you the money to do that, but you will continue only to pay 35%. And we'll have a lien on the balance, and when you sell a house, then we'll recover that balance as we transition that house back into the market. So that keeps them in the house even as it gets repaired as it should. Now, if we compare how many we can do that way versus what it would cost to build a new unit, we can do a lot of those. But the downside of that is if they're a young person, 60, and you do that, they may be in that house for 30 years or more, and you may be tying up that kind of capital. The city of Tacoma is doing a lot of these, not only loan renovations, but also in some cases, just outright loaning money to be able just to pay the bills. And doing the same kind of second deed or second lien payable when it's sold. And their key issue is to do some life cycle to see just how long the implications of this are compared to other. They're doing cost benefit analysis. How can we take the least amount of money to get the most return? And increasingly, it's not necessary to build. It's to use all other methods of delivery.
That loan program would still avoid that reverse mortgages, wouldn't? How would that function different than reverse mortgages in terms of keeping the housing stock there?
In some respects, the coming into households that's in stress and loaning and basically taking a second mortgage, that's kind of a reverse mortgage but done publicly. The bigger challenge is the renovation. Banks won't loan, and that's an issue even when a young household tries to buy a used house, it's indeed. And for a long time, the problem was the banks wouldn't loan to a young couple that could buy a fixer-upper, and then nobody would take the fixer-upper unless it was a flipper, which there are very few of those, and then it just deteriorated. And those programs are designed for that, and now FHA will do a mortgage that includes renovation costs, and they'll bill it right into the package. So the minute you buy the house, before you even take occupancy, the repairs are done and financed. So FHA's gotten smarter that the first thing you do is retain that product because we can't replace it.
Excuse me. I have a couple of questions and an observation. First of all, reverse mortgages are very dangerous,
especially if you run out.
Yeah, and we're seeing, and I have walked around several neighborhoods and I've seen houses that are vacant now because they were reverse mortgages, and the reverse mortgage has run out. Interest rates being what they are and so forth. So, man, that's a term that I really, really dislike. But the question I have is, are you suggesting that the city be involved in some sort of financing arrangement for these renovations, or does the city, for example, become a signer or guarantor, or how is the money being generated to do these renovations? You cited Tacoma, our budget.
How are we going to do it?
Yeah, how are we going to do it? I mean, we ain't got the money, pal.
The next one was establish an affordable housing coalition. First off, you can't do it yourself. The feds can't do it themselves. The nonprofits can't do it themselves. You all have to do it together. But one of the issues is seed money and how you would use seed money for what purpose. The renovation loan program, if it's a buying, as I said, the feds have actually started to develop programs which are more attuned to that, even in the last 2-3 years, FHA's program. But at some point in time, you do have to consider cash and non-cash approaches. And this was some of the strategies we asked. So one was a coalition. You can't have a housing strategy if it's just a city. You need the housing authority, you need the comp, you need everybody involved, including private market solutions. The other issue is, what kinds of incentives do you do to get the private market to be a partner in that? Do you provide them cash? Cash meaning defer their utility hookups, defer their building permits and so on. And the question is, what do you get in exchange? Well, you might get a percent that are affordable. Then if they don't provide affordable, there's no deferment. If they do provide affordable, it depends on what they're providing affordable for. And that can be the basis of the incentive. We tend to use incentives rather than mandatories. I can cover mandatories later if you want, but it's more complicated. The other is to provide non-cash incentives. If you provide affordable units, then we'll look at the density. Can we increase the density or the height? If you provide it on a walkable area on a transit line, maybe the question is parking requirements. Can we allow smaller units within the same envelope? Can we increase the size of the envelope? Can we look at exempting property taxes, which you already have with what's been done at the state level and is even being debated to being expanded from that? Can you encourage this innovative housing construction techniques? Not everybody's code allows manufacture. Not everybody's code allows containers. Not everybody's code allows 3D printing houses. And the last is who's going to, and then of course if you're looking to do your cash, what most of the cities have been using is a property tax levy that's used to begin the capitalization of that. Seattle has done about 3 of those. They're 7-year levies, and then they use the amounts which they generate from the levy to finance almost all of these kinds of programs. But before they put it up on a referendum, they've done the homework to say this is exactly where it's going to go, and this is the cost benefit return, and so on. Bellingham just did theirs. And the key challenge is the housing tax levy is to show how you brought in more partners. How many partners it stimulates and has synergy with, and so on. We'll go back to that graphic I showed you. You got to do all the bullets. If all you do is try the cash incentives where you say, well, we'll defer the building permits, you're not going to make a dent. If you decide you're just going to get non-cash incentives for densities, you're not going to make a dent. If all you do is just modular housing and modular housing on myself, that's not enough. You got to do all of them. And probably the biggest challenge, I think, for an area like this is some of the products that I showed you are niche developers that know how to do modular, know how to do ADUs, or know how to do the 3D printing and so on. And you don't have them because that market is not big enough here for them to spend the time and effort to come here. They go where it's easy to do that. They're doing it in Seattle. Question for you is if you want to play with that, then you got to bring them here. You got to have some demonstration or some opportunity for them to do that. And what the Jamestown Scholem tried looking at is doing some of those demonstrations. They're starting their own housing solution strategy, and in the middle of that process will be, once they've identified needs and sites all over the county, then they're going to bring in those kinds of niche developers and say, these are some of our sites and some of our needs, what can you do? Show us what you can do for cost. Show us what you can do for the kinds of households or housing that you would solve. Tell us if we have problems with codes, or we have problems with zoning, or have problems with something else, and we'll see if we can't solve that. And in some respects, the tribe has more latitude if it's on their property than you have, but it's an opportunity for you and SQUIM and the rest of the county maybe to play in that game. Because these kinds of things, you've got to bring the talent here. You've got the need, but if you're a developer within Untitled County, you build for that biggest blue bar is because that's what you know how to do and that's what you know there's a secure market for. If you're going to build for those other niches, then you've got to bring in somebody that knows how to do that, and you've got to demonstrate that there's enough return for them to warrant coming in. That's a partial answer. It's not an easy answer.
It's also assuming that nobody's doing ADU construction here, which isn't necessarily the case. We've talked to some developers who are trying to prioritize ADU development and that sort of thing, and they've asked us to cut back on off-street parking requirements, cut back on some of the size requirements. So I mean, we are in that discussion. And I think you have one person, which probably isn't enough, but like there's at least one person here who's trying to do more ADUs already. And I think we as a city are standing in their way by not implementing the recommendations that they're giving us for how to make that more affordable and low cost for those kinds of constructions.
Well, one of the things that was left in our analysis is to do 3 prototypes. One for a downtown site, one for a mixed-use site, and one for what we might call a cottage housing site. And these are quick envelope studies, and then we'll test the very same things I showed you as we did in Bellingham to see what return you get by variance on the things within that. We're not looking to the level of detail that the scallops will go to. We're looking just at a very quick overview, see just what things make sense and what kind of product you could end up with. But you might find that those would then provide you the kind of information you could then begin to have meaningful discussions.
Great. A question as to the status of our current housing. I guess I was under the impression that we also get a chance to know what does our current housing look like? Do we have a lot of them that are in good shape? Which ones are in bad shape? How many are empty? How many are generally single housing, duplexes versus apartments?
When we did that's all in the data tables with the ACS, and I didn't pull those out to show you. And the issues are age as well, plumbing, size of rooms, lead and paint, those kinds of characteristics. As the ACS measures those, American Community Survey. And unfortunately, that's probably as deep as we can go without going site specific. But we do have those indicators, and I just didn't put those in charts.
And I guess the other one I was looking for was how many lots are empty, that would fit, that we can get, for housing. And so that way we can identify potentially where future housing can go, as well as, how many lots would be perfect for, densifying, whether we have the square footage there or not.
And I think that gets, well, there's 2 questions there. One is in your own land use analysis, your buildable lands component of your comprehensive plan. How much is vacant and what is it zoned for and what's its capacity? When you marry this with that, though, then your question is, so what should we produce now? How does the land mix fit? And how does our zoning fit that and so on? And as I said, as our population has aged, our problem is our land use policies are still predominantly single family. And as we want to begin to look at other kinds of housing types, it's more than just a question of where's the land and can we put a structure on it? Where's transit, or where's transit going to be provided? Where's the jobs and the groceries and the schools? Can we walk to them or not? So that they're back and they're iterative. And this will begin to give you the need issues. And I think as you look at your land use plan, you're going to be beginning to look at, are we profiling the types of things that we really should be profiling? Do we have enough of a higher density to match what we think we're going to go to with the available land? And does that land in the right place? I would say that the first thing that most communities forget is to save what you got. Really, I can't tell you how many communities have just, and if you look at what happened with the bank foreclosures, or you look at Detroit, when the banks came in and foreclosed, the banks are not good landlords, they just let them deteriorate. And if you look at some of those neighborhoods, there's only 1 out of 4 houses still standing, because when they deteriorated so much, the bank's easy way out was just to demolish them. So they end up with just decimated neighborhoods. And if you think about it, there's probably enough existing housing stock there that could have met most of their housing needs if they'd just been smart enough to realize that and saved it.
And so I guess that's another question. How many properties are currently owned by banks that are empty or that are just sitting there? And that's, I think, one of the things we need to find out. I know I had a conversation with First Federal, and they own 0 houses, that are in that state. And so if we can find out, everybody talks, well, it's outside banks. So if we can find those properties, they're willing to do a title search on some of them, you know, if we can find the empty ones.
I think one of the people that was on the working group came up with that foreclosure list.
Okay.
And it is possible to pull those.
Do we know whether we have a lot of those or not?
Members have been working
Well,
on
the
that.
difference would be, you can find HUD foreclosures and get that data very quickly. Getting to the ones where the bank is the one that has them is a little more difficult. But I think to you, it's very important. You want to be ahead of them.
Just a quick question on the talent, as you called it. It occurs to me, and again, this leads to what you're talking about. We have a spot here, it's kind of like a shaggy dog. And so spots all over the place, but not one central. When we are trying to attract these type of people that would build these, especially the type of units, are they looking for, a development type of area, or is it attractive enough for them to be here, there, and do you understand what I'm talking about? Because we don't really have a large tract that we can offer to them, but we have maybe a lot here or a lot there. Is that something that possibly the town, again, that you talked about, be interested in doing? If we could, inventory that and say, it's not all in one spot, but there's enough of it maybe all over the place to make it worth your while. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm...
It's not always what you can inventory, it's what's available. It's not just, the vacant properties and there's somebody that owns them. It's what owners want to play. They want to make it available, want to do something. I'll give you an example. For a long time, Mr. Bremer owns huge parts of downtown Bremerton. He was a nice, ethical guy. He loved to talk to developers and consultants, but he was a holder. He held them. And so when everybody would come and show his funds, he was really, that's cool. But he didn't do anything with them. So the developers, their key issue is, I don't care who owns it, does he want to sell it? Does he want to participate? Does he want to do something else? So if you want to attract a developer, it isn't your map of vacant properties, it's what properties are available for what they want to do. And you don't need a lot of those. So one of the opportunities with the Jamestown housing analysis is they're going to buy property or their own property. But if at the time that we do this housing marketplace where we bring in those niche developers, you don't need a ton of properties. You just need one that's available that fits their profile. And you only need to have one successful project to all of a sudden stimulate the market. Nobody knows how to do that project until the first one's built and everybody's an expert. If you can see what I mean in the housing market. Nobody is going to risk taking the chance until they see that it works, and once they see that it works, they'll figure out even better ways of doing it from there on. And that's what you got to do, is get that first example.
Earlier this month, I was at a presentation where a local contractor said that he quotes the average cost per square foot at $225 to build something in Clallam County. And so the prices of the smaller things that you were showing us earlier is substantially less than that. What are some of the strategies for us to change the dynamic around what people think of as the price per square foot for possible development in a place like Port Angeles?
It depends on what you're building. And even at $255 a square foot, are you building a 2,000 square foot house or a 500 square foot micro unit? That's a big difference. Are you doing it modular, or are you going to do it on site? Are you going to furnish it and just truck it in and erect it versus stick built even off site? Are you going to play with things like 3D printing? You can 3D print a house in a day. And then who are you building it for? So, in your market, that's the way the formula would work, and that would give you your housing price, and that's what you're doing. When the issues are there, enough people can pay that price to keep that going. But if you're a niche developer, you figured out other ways of meeting a certain type of household, and that you fit that product to that. And that's why the most hot stuff in Seattle right now are the micro units, because there's plenty of millennials and individuals and so on that want that product. And so they figured out how to deliver that product. Now, it could end up being $255 a square foot, but in a whole different package. If you can see what I'm saying. He's not wrong. He's in a different market and a different product. This is as much art as it is science. And so, I can tell you all these stats, I can show you all the examples, but a lot of it depends on how you cultivate your opportunity. And all you got to do is get past some of those first examples, and your market will change. I can't tell you how quickly it'll change. But until you do, you're going to be producing the same product that everybody knows what it is, and you're going to run the risk that your existing stock is going to start disappearing, and then you're in big trouble. With that happy note.
Yeah, well, I guess, and one of the things that, I know that we've got another month to complete this, so I guess for the final analysis, I really do want to see how many houses are foreclosed, how many are empty, what is the state of our current housing stock, so that we get some sense of, how many are dilapidated, or even just the year they were built. That would give us some sense of, well, I guess it's not necessarily true. Because
So I can help you out, Mayor, just by telling you what we are looking at. So the benefit of, being a full-service city is that we have utility data. So we are looking, we're going to our finance department to just see how much we could maybe find in terms of indicating factors to indicate when a house might be vacant. However, we do have a population that, comes to our community for just a portion of the year. So it's just looking at that data set and trying to see what we might have. It's not going to be specific, but we can certainly include that in our final evaluation. I've talked to several realtors who definitely have identified, big bank-owned properties that are vacant, and there's some requirements on, how long we have to ensure that they are being offered to potential family members and they just stay vacant for some time. So we are trying to look into that. In terms of housing stock data, that's going to be a little bit beyond the scope of this assessment in terms of age of buildings. We have used some data sets, and I think it's around 1968 is our average housing stock. Also talking to some realtor friends, it's a big distinguishment for Port Angeles versus Swim, that's building very new. So that has also been something that I know we've done internally with job applicants, both at the city level and at the hospital. Just the type of house that a family is looking for is not available in our community. So we can try to find that data set. Certainly vacant homes is something that we're looking at. To include in the final action plan.
And it would be also good to find out, how many, vacant apartments are there in the city. I know there's not too many, and what is open, what are the available rates, so that, I know that you always have some statistics about how our rental market is really not there. How really not there is it? We have one rental unit, is that what we have, or do we have 10, or do we have 20?
And those numbers are what we've heard from our working group is those numbers fluctuate greatly every single month. So you really can't have a static number. It is greatly changing, and then you have the challenge of just, working with every potential management group that's managing these properties for rent. It's difficult to track. We can try to include some data sets. Certainly the numbers that Tom shared is more at a county level. We could try to look at some Port Angeles specifics, but that was the intent of the survey. Overall, we definitely heard from the respondents that they feel like there's difficulty in finding something available to rent. But those numbers are really fluctuating every single month.
Like I said, even an average for the year would be close enough. But I guess it's, okay.
The only other thing I would add to that, as I said, we had the data from the American Community Survey, but it's place data. It's not, I mean, once the decadal census is done, you get down to block data and all that information. But that usually comes 4 years after the census is done. So probably the most useful thing is that idea of creating a coalition where you're sharing that back and forth between those that are listing properties and building properties. And you don't want to do a plan and an analysis like this and then wait 5 years and do it again. The advantage is these players are already engaged. They already came to the sessions, and on a continuous basis, they can provide what is possible to do and what they're working on.
I was curious, who's on the work group that you're working with?
So we mostly included some staff members, so a member from my staff, finance, police, and then we actually had some overlap of our task force members. So we had a representative from Habitat for Humanity of Fountain County, United Way of Fountain County. We had Mr. Gary James from James and Associates, and forgive me, I'm forgetting somebody, and Julie Knott from our previous interim executive director from Cloud County EDC. The point of that working group, sorry to interrupt Tom, we recognize just quickly that the Housing Task Force, while it's a great effort the city is doing, there were several members, and it's going to be difficult to have a large group like that, kind of dive down into some nitty-gritty detailed matters. That's why we had this working group. Oh, I'm sorry, representative from the Coast Guard, to our housing officer from the Coast Guard.
All right, any further questions? Thank you so much.
Sure.
We appreciate that.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank Tom again for staying late and thank the members of the community who attended. We are intending to get the final action plan. I think it's our intent to actually have that presented to the Housing Task Force for their consideration in about a month's time. So I think we'll be working on making that meeting scheduled and also allowing an opportunity for the public to attend that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the final step would be incorporation of these recommendations into our comprehensive plan, specifically in our housing element. And we would plan to do that with our ongoing amendment efforts, which would be concluded in June.
Okay, thank you. All right, going, I guess, back to the agenda. We are late items.
Madam Mayor, I do have a late item to add, and I might make up for it with some suggested comments for council to consider. The item that I need to add is we do have application process underway relative to both the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee and to the Planning Commission. And at this point, we have 3 Planning Commission openings with 7 different applicants. We have 9 seats open with the opening until I believe the 22nd on the Lodging Tax Committee. And so at this point, I just want to either reconfirm the ad hoc committee that's been looking at lodging tax appointments and as well as get either a separate or similar ad hoc committee relative to the Planning Commission appointment. And that's the late item I'd like to add. My friendly suggestion to council, recognizing the late hour that we have right now, if council so chose, I think as a formality, you have items J1 through 3. Most of those were simple project closures. The reason you did not see them on the consent agenda was because of the dollar amount. So should council wish to add those to the consent, you'd be welcome to do that. I might also add that item I5 is fairly straightforward. If council wanted to add that to consent, that might be another way to abbreviate the remainder of the meeting.
And in some ways, I would agree, but they are so fast that I think we can really crank through them really quickly too, in case anybody had any questions. Liz, for council, what would you like to do?
I'm going to move to add item I5 and item J1, item J2, and item J3 to the consent agenda.
Second.
So, any further discussion on that? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it looks like we will add them to the consent agenda. So, all right, now the application process for the LTAC and the planning commission, we'll just add it to other consideration.
Correct, other considerations, please.
All right, so with that, are there any other items from anybody? No, so let me read the consent agenda. The consent agenda, the city council minutes for February 5th, 2019, expenditure report from January 6th, 2019 to February 8th, 2019 in the amount of $2,187,385.07. Final acceptance for CON 2018-22 poll testing, authorized and release of retainage in the amount of $1,715.95. Declaration of emergency resolution ratification. That's the resolution. And the community facade grant program, the redesignation, to authorize designation. The joint meeting with the Collin County Commissioners from March 20. Not that one, just that. Oh, sorry. The final acceptance of CL 0316 underground cable replacement 2018. Final acceptance of CL 0616 overhead reconductoring 2018. And final acceptance of CON 218-21 tree trimming for 2018. So, that's the consent agenda as read. Council, what do you want to do?
Motion to approve is read.
All right, is there any discussion? So, I do, for the facade grant, I noticed that there's certain sections that were selected. So it would be Race Street to Laurel and then Oak Street. And I'm just wondering, it seems like we do this piecemeal. We always find either, we'll do it here and then we'll do it there. And I would like to see an overall map of all the areas where the facade grant should apply. Because I think we have a lot of quarters where it could apply. And I don't understand why we close it just to certain little areas in different years. Because in different years, we've had different areas for the facade grant. And so I would really love to see one map that shows all the areas where facade grants should go to, and then open it, and then we can do a first come, first serve, or we can, highlight, I don't know. It just doesn't seem fair that we just open certain little areas and not others when there's facade grants when there may be potential for people who are like, oh, I didn't realize our area falls within this facade area, and we could have done it, so.
So I'm going to have to add some comments to that. So the intent, again, of course, we have commercial corridors that are available for the facade program. The redevelopment areas are specific for request reimbursement over $10,000. That's how the program is designed currently. So the little pieces of areas are just, again, to go over that maximum reimbursement that's currently in the program framework and ordinance. Now, if there is a desire from council to have that maximum increase, that would be a change in the current ordinance of the program. We would have to look at that. Certainly the intent was to ensure the amount of money that we have available for the program just lasts as long as it can with the smaller increments of money.
Right. But what I don't, so it seems like a project is identified, and so then therefore those areas are like, well, we have a project here and a project here, so then let's just use those areas. Rather than the opposite, let's open up the areas and then see what projects come in, and then we can do a first come, first serve, and then still limit it to 10,000 without having,
It's definitely possible, it just would require some change to how the program and specifically the redevelopment areas were specified in our ordinance and the creation of the program. It's just a different approach, and it could definitely work. It was interesting just to see a slow response to the redevelopment area between, on First Street, between Laurel and Race. We did have some applicants come forward, but even after an effort of notifying business and property owners, we did not have a large response. So again, I agree with you that it's certainly will be interesting to see maybe what other areas are hotspots right now that we haven't identified as a city, but that would just involve a change in the scope of our program where it would really be, potentially it's not, you have to really open up potentially, above maximum 10 for all the commercial corridors. And then you would have a first come, first serve approach.
Right, and I would say you don't have to go above 10, because you can keep it that, it's just, we'll just open up the areas where it can happen. And I guess that's what I'm kind of getting at, it's just, we've limited so much that, that I'd like to see it more open, and there could be places that are willing and wanting to utilize that, but they're not in the area, so they can't.
Do we currently use up all of the facade grant funds, or is there left over?
In terms of it every year?
I don't know how frequently it resets or.
Yeah, I mean, we this last time we contributed an amount of money that was for a 2-year period. And overall, we still have money in the bank for use. So, I mean, I couldn't give you an exact number of what we're averaging per year. I certainly could comfortably say that the program is becoming more popular over the last 3 years since my arrival. And again, I apologize, the memo tonight didn't outline the program, facade program in detail, but it is available throughout the community in every commercial corridor. So that's the current allowances right now in terms of commercial zoning. We have to be mindful of the original intent, since the money is coming from CDBG money. We have to ensure that we demonstrate that the benefit is for the greater public good, and we need an argument that can occur by demonstrating improvements to building exteriors in primary commercial corridors.
Excuse me. We have included the facade question in the consent agenda.
Yes.
Is it your desire to pull it out of the consent agenda, vote on the consent agenda, and then readdress this? I'm not clear as to where we're going with
This is just part of the discussion, and I guess at this point, I think I would like to pull it out of the consent agenda, because I think I would want us to change to this.
Madam Mayor, if I can help with some comments, because perhaps I have some history that is relevant. Again, I think that it's really important council understand that we are trying to incentivize improvements to individuals' property throughout every single one of our commercial corridors. And so any of those commercial corridors, one can come in and apply tomorrow for a facade improvement grant and receive matching funding, a 50-50 matching funding grant up to $10,000. What we have done is specified in the ordinance that the council ordinance specifies the ability for council to designate redevelopment areas, and those redevelopment areas are designed to really focus on areas where the city is either making investments or we would like to inspire additional investments. And I think as you look at the First Street corridor, specifically the goal was to really inspire further development in those blocks, blocks that really need some help in some cases. Also a significant number of anchors in those locations, such as the Lincoln Theater, where we could really inspire a larger change that we recognize is going to cost more money for someone to take out, or more of an investment for people to put in. I think too, it's important that we probably have averaged about 7 applications each year since 2009. We're coming up on our 10th year anniversary. That might be a good time to reevaluate and look at the program. But I will say that the program has been quite successful, and if you look at some of the successes, there's a lot of good that's been done, and it's open to everyone. What you do see is you do see money coming back for those projects that weren't successful or simply didn't follow through with the grant that was given, and for that reason you see a pretty substantial pot of money to allow us to have a first come, first serve approach for everyone in the community right now that has either a commercial business within the city that's legally existing. In some cases, those are even in industrial zones, but also in all of our commercial corridors. So I think it's really an open and welcoming program right now, and really it's those target areas where we invested a substantial amount of money in the waterfront, and therefore Railroad Avenue became a target area, and there's a desire to see an extension of some of that targeting, but as well as just looking at the corridor that we have on First Street from Race to Laurel Street. That's a really important corridor with a lot of need if you take a look at it.
Thank you for that clarification, because that being open to everybody was what I really wanted. That redevelopment area I see as being targeted, and so I can see that. But I would like, I would suggest you guys, like I said, you're coming into your 10th year. It has done a lot of really good things. If you can take a look at it next year to make sure that it continues to be inclusive and push in those directions. All right, are there any other comments to the consent agenda? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. So we are going to move to ordinance amending changes relating to fees and cost of public records.
Okay, I will take that one. This is the second reading of this ordinance and proposal for adoption of the ordinance. Just a reminder on this, we started out at the last meeting with an ordinance that was in the packet that drew some comments, and the comments actually were good suggestions for change. And so at the last meeting we had proposed, in the packet we proposed an ordinance. We also proposed the council adopt an emergency in order to adopt the ordinance and have it go into effect immediately. After receiving those comments, though, the staff thought they were good, solid improvements to the ordinance, and so we presented a new ordinance at the council meeting, last meeting. And because we were presenting a new ordinance at that time, we withdrew the suggestion that you adopted it, and we instead suggested you just go through the normal process of a first reading and second reading. So the ordinance that's up for second reading tonight is the improved version of the ordinance. We think that it is actually a better version than the initial suggestion, which was actually came from the State Attorney General's office. This ordinance adopts the fees for the production of certain types of public records that are included in a 2017 state statute. And the 2017 state statute actually authorizes cities to adopt a process to determine their own fees if they go through a process of analyzing their actual costs for each individual city. And the process that's outlined in the statute is so detailed that in fact no city's actually done it. So all the cities have pretty much adopted these, which are de facto going to probably become the standard fees. And we in Port Angeles have a minimum fee. We don't charge anything unless the total cost is at least $5. And we've had that rule for several years. It's been working out well. And as a practical matter, because of that rule, the vast majority of records requests result in no cost being charged to the public. So this is, I view this as a cleanup ordinance. It brings us into compliance with the 2017 law. If you have any questions, we did discuss this at fair length last meeting. If you have any other questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Great, thank you. Well, let me read the ordinance. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, amending Chapter 2.74 of the Port Angeles Municipal Code relating to fees and costs charged for providing copies of certain public records.
I move to adopt the ordinance as read.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. So, and I know it is getting late, it's getting to be around 15, so, and to do, there was a couple of items in the think tank, which I don't think we will be able to give it proper time as it's so late. Would you guys, would it be okay if we postpone it until the next meeting? Would that be a better option rather than having to slug through it and not do it justice?
I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think we want to actually be able to spend some time talking about that stuff, and I don't want to, I think we'll end up, everyone says one thing and we move on and it won't be productive, so. As much as there's some time sensitivity to it, I think putting it off to our next meeting is probably a wise idea.
So I would like to revisit my motion.
Okay, and actually, before you do that, though, there is one item that we do need to, it should be a very short discussion, and I'm going to actually pass this way. It's that way, that I would like to get to, because it just has to do with this scholarship that we could approve or not approve at our March 8th meeting. So AWC has a,
Point of order.
Sorry.
There's a motion as to whether to have a think tank, and that should be discussed before we go into the think tank. Or voted on, really.
okay, but okay, so you've set a motion?
I would like to reopen my motion to delete think tank for this meeting.
And I will add my second then.
And so as a discussion item, I would like to just have one item discussed because I think it's time sensitive. So I can support this if we add this as a late motion. Would that be okay? I don't know if that's...
That would have to be a friendly amendment,
okay.
and you have to have somebody make that friendly amendment.
So I'll make the friendly amendment.
You cannot, you're the mayor conducting the meeting.
All right.
I'll make a friendly, I would like to request a friendly amendment to deleting the think tank with the exception of a brief comment about the scholarship from EWC.
All right.
I'll accept that.
Thank you. Will you accept that, Jim?
Yeah, so we can vote on your friendly amendment, and then vote on the full motion, and then if that passes, then we can talk about this and move on.
Sounds great. So we've got a motion on the table and a second. Any further discussion?
Just briefly, if these are separate items, and we know that they're coming out as separate items, I think they should be separate items on the agenda rather than lumped into think tank discussion where it's not really clear what we're going to be discussing. So that would be my preference moving forward. If we know we've got something specific that's going to be its own discussion, let's get it separate in the agenda.
And I would agree, this one came up in the last minute, so, yeah.
But we do have an emotion. We have an emotion here.
Right, so we got a motion on the table and a second. Any further discussion? No? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. That settles the friendly amendment, so now the major amendment to delete the think tank.
All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those motions pass.
You're right.
Like I said, AWC, a Center for Quality Communities, is a 501c3 organization, and they've said that we could nominate a student for our community. And so when I saw that come to our email, I emailed quickly to Michelle Jeffrey, who I knew worked with high school students, to say, hey, do we have any nominations? Or would you be able to nominate somebody? And then She said, yeah, I could probably come, find a student who would fit this. But then I realized, okay, well, she asked how we asked everybody else. I'm like, no, we have not asked them, So, are there other places or other people that we need to ask to see whether we should have names come forward for nomination? Anybody else that we know we need to reach out to? And if not, should we take Michelle's nomination and should we decide this on our March meeting? What's the question?
I think it's a good idea to, if we get some nominations, to consider someone at our next meeting, because it is time sensitive, and that next meeting is the only meeting before the deadline. I would suggest I'm going to miss her name, so the leadership group at the high school, and then Shawnee's group at the high school. Can't remember what that's called either right now, I'm totally drawing a blank. So I'm wondering, instead of brainstorming those lists right now, can we email you if we come up with ideas?
Sure.
If we email you by the end of the week?
That would be great, and I was going to say...
Or reach out to those people ourselves.
Yes, actually, if you could reach out to those people yourselves, that would be great, so that way I will tell them, Michelle, but she said, well, do we want to go ahead and ask the parents, and the kids to go ahead and start filling out the application. So I will tell her yes for the person that she believes would fit, and if you can say do the same, come the 5th, we'll see whether we have 1 nomination or 5, and then we can make a decision on those, right?
Yeah, this also needs to be passed on to be fair to the homeschool community also.
Right.
High school's not the only place people.
So that's the reason I'm asking for how do we reach forward and who would take that task on?
Well, it seems to me like today we should decide whether to nominate the student by March 8th. And if we decide to do that, then we should advertise publicly. I think just the email list is probably enough. It might be in the newspaper, but well, it could be in the newspaper too. And then like anyone who wants to submit a nomination can do so in time by whatever deadline we want to set before March 8th, so that we can decide that. But I agree with Councilmember Merritt that it shouldn't be just whichever particular people at whichever schools they have a student in mind.
Would it be reasonable to ask if staff could write a brief press release that we could share?
Or, I think this is the release from AWC, which should probably do it. I'm afraid that if we have 100 applications, are we going to go through these to try to figure out who we're going to nominate? And 2, I'd like to do this, but do we have the time and the capacity to handle it? So that's the reason I said, the only one I could think of was Michelle Titter at the time. I thought, okay, I'll just ask that. But and I do think it needs to be another process. So
right, I'd rather not do it than just take the one person that was suggested. We could set an earlier deadline and see how many applications we get, and then pull a group together if we need to, maybe? I don't know. It's a good question. Because I think maybe in some ways it makes more sense to wait until next year knowing that it's coming and plan ahead for it so we can create a subcommittee to screen applications or not. But on the other hand,
yeah, actually, I think this is the first time I've seen anything from AWC, but I may be wrong. I don't know if they do this every year or not, but this is the first time I've seen it. And I think they're taking 6. So 6 $1,000 scholarships will be awarded in May.
I move that the city nominate a student for the scholarship and Mayor Brooke head a committee of her choice to select that nominee.
Second.
You guys know you're all serving on that committee, right? All right, so we got a motion to table in a second.
Aye.
Any further discussion? And I guess the discussion for me is that I will not know who needs to be reached out to. So I am going to put that on somebody else's shoulders. I will review applications, and I will, have you nominate a student from this committee, but I will not contact everybody. So however, somebody here has to take over contacting somebody else. So let's vote on this one first. So all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
So that one passes. Oh, is any opposed? Okay, so who wants to volunteer to contact the high school group to make sure that that happens?
Do you have Shawnee and, I can't say her name right now.
Yeah.
Leadership?
I think the way to do it is to just, we put it out there as an announcement, and then, if anyone wants to support it, particular people, we can do that, members of the public can do that, whoever wants to send it on can do that.
So do we want to put this on our webpage, and would that suffice?
We can do that and share it. We can put it on, there are a few Facebook groups I think that people might see, and then when we have specific contact information, we can send it on.
All right, so then the city will put the AWC request on the webpage, and that will make it transparent and open and clear.
And Madam Mayor, we would probably have the deadline be the Friday prior to council packet deadline, which would probably be next Friday, a week from this coming Friday. I believe that would be March 1st. Actually, that would miss it. We may have to use, this is going to be a pretty quick turnaround. So probably Monday the 25th would need to be our deadline.
Well, because it won't be needing to go to the packet, because we'll have a little subcommittee.
Okay.
So the only thing that needs to go in the packet is that we will have a student's name to nominate. And then that, as soon as the subcommittee gets done, I'm hoping that, what was I thinking? He said, if it's two, I can do it. If it's more than, or whatever. So, okay. So for the next agenda, we'll just put that the council will nominate a student based on the subcommittee's recommendation.
So what's the deadline? I think that's the question. That's the answer you need, right?
So this has to be, it could be as, March, we can give them March 3rd or March 5th meeting. So I can turn that around.
Okay.
And like I said, I might pull a couple of you guys into this.
Yeah. And March 3rd is a Sunday, I'm not sure if we want that, or if we want, we could have it be emailed to the city by a certain time on Sunday.
Yeah, then I can and then so March. Yeah, so it's got to be in before the beginning of the day on the 4th. How's that? Because the 4th is a Monday, right? Right, so Monday morning we'll know exactly how many.
Say 5 p.m. on Sunday the 3rd.
There you go. 5 p.m.
You don't want any midnight submissions.
Midnight, yeah. Okay, so 5 p.m. on Sunday. All right, thank you guys, I appreciate it. Like I said, I saw this and I thought we could do something. All right, moving on to the joint meeting with Collin County Commissioners, March 26th discussion. So we got a letter for that meeting. And the few agenda items that they were thinking about was the PA housing assessment, presentation by Mary Hogan on homelessness task force, review of the 2060 and 2161 funding streams, and conversation about improved regional coordination of housing and homelessness issues. Those were some of the topics they threw out for that meeting.
I really like the topics that they've suggested, and I like the idea of working together on some of those issues, particularly because they have the primary funding source, and I think we're seeing some things at the local, hyper-local level that would be worth sharing with them. I will be out of town on the 26th, so it's not my first choice. I'll be at a conference for work, so it's not my first choice of dates, but if that's the one date that works for everybody else, I certainly I could do my best to call in or just not be there.
Madam Mayor, if I can make an alternate suggestion, certainly we could do something between, say, 4:30 and 6 p.m. on March 19th, prior to our regularly scheduled council meeting, if that works better for everyone. That's something that we could do.
That would
Or we
work
could do
better.
5 to 6.
Anything earlier than the 19th probably won't work for me, sorry.
All right, so, more for the 19th looks good. So what
We
about
we can certainly look at additional dates if that's helpful and come back. We can also bring this back as a topic for conversation, both relative to agenda items at your next meeting. Just put it on the agenda for discussion at your next meeting. I don't know that time is critical here.
It is not, because when I had the conversation with Commissioner Zayas, March and September were thrown as just, hey, let's, twice a year, let's get that in there. And so if it has to be, April, I think it'll be okay.
Does it have to be on a Tuesday?
It does not have to be on a Tuesday either, but, we could, I guess that is one thing. I know folks that work would prefer it in the evening, and
Well, the advantage of a date like the 26th is it's a date that staff already has reserved as a potential work session, so staff doesn't have to reorganize if they're going to be participating in the meeting.
that's true.
That's just an argument for a Tuesday.
And I think one of the county's goals, as I understand it, was to do it in conjunction with an existing meeting, whether it's a council meeting or a Collin County Commissioner meeting, but try to do it in conjunction with the regular meeting that already exists.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's it, and if the first meeting in April works, then. Actually, does the first meeting in April work for everybody?
It's spring break. I'll be here, so.
I didn't hear the question.
Does the first week in April, meeting, the first week in April?
Oh, that's spring break.
Well,
I mean, what about March 19th at our regularly scheduled city council meeting at 6 p.m.?
So during our council meeting on the 19th.
That's a council meeting, not a joint meeting.
Well, maybe depending on how the items are, maybe we do that first and then maybe second, I don't know how.
Maybe Manager West would like to weigh in on that.
I can't say that's been done before. Probably we could explore that and get back to you.
and hopefully keep the agenda items to a minimum if we did that.
Definitely.
Yeah, we might have to just have a,
In the interest of time, can I suggest, without a motion, that we take Manager West's suggestion of talking about this again at the next meeting?
I think that makes sense. All right, sounds great, thank you. And then, so that lets us to council reports. Let's start with Jim this time.
I didn't do anything. Did you realize it snowed? No, actually, I was able to squeeze in one meeting with the Communication Technology Department. I'm the advisor for the CTE program for the Communication Technology Department, headed up by Mr. Patrick McGinnis. They're the kids that put on those productions. They did the theater production for Little Shop of Horrors. They will be doing the theater production for the play in the fall, the musical Peter and the Starcatcher. It's a prequel to Peter Pan, and so it's going to be produced at the high school, and I'm looking forward to that. The class has grown to three sections, and it has 150 students in it now.
Oh my gosh.
So communication technology, theater technology, and broadcast journalism are now part of the school's curriculum for communication technology as the overall. And so we had an advisory meeting before the Snowmageddon occurred. So it was really, really great, and it was really fascinating to know that the students are not only benefiting from this program, they're going on to other opportunities in the communication technology field. And this department is thriving at the school. The bad news is Snowmageddon canceled 3 broadcasts that I was planning to do for the basketball team. Congratulations to the girls going on to state, the girls basketball team, and the PA boys still had a fine season, so we changed it the other day, but my congratulations to them. I wish I could have broadcasted, but I didn't, and I didn't have my microphone on, so I'll start all over again. I'm done.
Let's see, I just want to give a shout out to Principal Michelle Olson at Roosevelt Elementary, who organized this amazing event showing a film, Resilience, which is about neuroscience, epigenetics, adverse childhood experiences, and resilience. And they had free dinner, and they had childcare, and there were hundreds of people there, and it was really amazing. So I think that was a great thing that the school district did in helping to move the community in the community conversation toward understanding what children need to be able to be healthy.
I will just talk about my experience on Sunday the 9th during Snowmageddon. I didn't have my kids, so I called Amy Miller on Sunday morning and said, I'm free, what can I do to help? And so a couple of things happened. One, she said, well, Serenity House is open and they need more food. So in the meantime, so she was going to come pick me up. In the meantime, I talked to my sister-in-law, Emily Dexter, who's the director of the food bank, and she said, don't go buy food, let's see if we have food at the food bank. So I put in a call to James to find out if the road had been plowed, and he said, if it hasn't, let us know, and we'll send someone down in 20 minutes and get it cleared. It had been, so that was great. And so Amy and Emily's family and I went down and we got food to Serenity House along with one of her employees. And then we packed food boxes. There were a number of generally outdoor homeless people who were staying at the Holiday Inn, and we got food boxes to most of them. And so I just wanted to say thank you to Amy and to Sheena Younger, who was out quite a lot, both with Rediscovery, to Emily, who did a little bit more than usual from the food bank. PAPD certainly was instrumental in getting people out of the out of doors during that. And also thank you to Serenity House for being willing to figure out a way to stay open 24 hours a day for the duration of most of the cold weather. So I think it was a really good example of people stepping up. I also think it was pretty amazing that Amy sort of got to a point where she said, I'm spending so much time trying to coordinate volunteers, which may be an interesting conversation for moving forward, how we can get people coordinated together, because there were a lot of people, yes, exactly when you were talking about that. I was thinking about that Sunday, and just during that event, there were so many people saying, I want to help, and how can I do that? And so, anyway, it was a good day, and it's never a bad thing to bring food to people and have them smile. So I was glad I was able to do that. I think it was helpful just to kind of see what that day looked like, thinking forward for potential policy implications. So.
There you go, Jim, I'll turn that on. I was out of town, so I came home to snow. And that was fine, I like the snow. It doesn't bother me any. It makes it hard to work. But it also makes it hard for some of our groups to practice and carry on and get to where they need to be. So I will put a plug for them, and that is the Valley Workshop is having their Swan Lake on Saturday and Sunday, March 23rd and March 24th, and those tickets are on sale now. You can get them down at Fort Book News, or you can get them in Squim or Brown Paper Tickets. And that is, I believe, the first time Miss Kate had to cancel the first cast rehearsal.
I want to thank the staff for doing an outstanding job keeping City Hall running, keeping it open, and gosh, we were snowed in and I enjoyed it, and but every time the snowplow would come down the street, one of us would yell, "Snowplow!" because because our street was getting, and up and down, and we went out and, I think the community really pulled together. I know we had called around and helped elderly friends who couldn't get out and get to the store. The grocery stores made an effort to stay open and be accommodating, and everyone was so accommodating and helpful. And I would shovel the sidewalk for an elderly lady, and then next time I go to bring her some food, somebody else had shoveled it. And this community's great. We really pulled together. But thank you, Mr. West, and your outstanding staff for keeping the city running during the biggest snowstorm most of us have seen. So thank you.
Yeah, and I will second that, because there was a monumental effort to move a lot of that snow. The only report I have is that we did have the presentation made from the MRC, our local MRC, and they do some really great projects. One of the things that they do is the celebration of science that happens on May 11th, May 10th. No, May 11th, and then on May 10th, they're hoping to extend this by bringing 4 very prominent scientists to discuss issues of the orca and some of this AOC stuff. So that's, we put together a grant, hopefully with called LPAC, because we're hoping to really bring some folks from Seattle for the celebration of science. So that's my only report I have. Pass it on.
Madam Mayor and Council, I'll try to be very brief so that Council can abide by the Council rules of procedure relative to the 9:45 cutoff for public comment. So to be really brief, work session next week on the 26th from 5 to 7 p.m. on general fund revenue sources. Additionally, we are working towards rescheduling the UAC meeting that got canceled because of the weather. We have sent out a tentative date but haven't heard back for the 27th. I believe from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. We're interested in knowing if that works. If not, we're going to look for some additional dates. But the goal would be to have the entire council at that meeting to receive a presentation on our water utility to begin the COSA process, the cost of service assessment process. Additionally, it looks like I already need to rework this date based on spring break, but we had tentatively penciled in a work session on April 2nd for the public restroom discussion that council asked for, but we'll look for another date, recognizing that we probably have at least 3 council members who will likely be on spring break at that time, and we'll come back to you with another date. And then lastly, I just want to say that I greatly appreciate the hard work of all of our staff. Everybody from equipment services to parks crews to streets crews to emergency services, everybody played a role in really cleaning up after the storm, and we're very appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just clarify that I didn't respond because the announcement was please send a reply if this date does not work for your schedule. So I apologize for not responding.
All right, so we are on to the second public comment period. So anybody who would like to speak to council, please state your name and name.
Shirley Smith, Port Angeles. I'd like to address the large naked elephant that was in the room. I've seen a lot of consultants. I've done a lot of research. That was one of the worst presentations I'd ever seen because it was about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours on the internet, and going to some of the websites the state has that you can download this information and elsewhere. Everything that we have, everything that you keep asking for is here in the city or with the county. You need to find somebody local who can do this because anyone from outside the area doesn't understand our community and is too lazy to come down and actually go through our records to find out what's available here. I hope you didn't pay too much. The guy didn't understand and he just did a boilerplate and it was a lousy presentation with no analysis. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Matt Jordan, resident of Port Angeles. One thing that I did hear Mr. Beckwith say was during his presentation was the jobs here in Port Angeles don't support the rent. And I wanted to make sure everybody heard that part. So it doesn't matter how many housing units we have here available. We could have 1 million units available, but if people can't afford them, we're just going to have a welfare city. So we need to attract business first and foremost, knowledge, wealth, talent, skills. I like the idea of the mixed use, business on bottom, residents on top model. I think that we have a lot of that in downtown that could be redeveloped into housing and business and attract young people. I work as a realtor here in town, and I get a lot of calls asking about commercial properties. There's not a lot of commercial properties available. People with fresh ideas, fresh perspectives want to do business in this town, but they don't have the opportunity to do so. And as far as the units, I believe if we think in 4D, we could probably come up with some solutions that we haven't really quite analyzed yet, which would be getting people, the current homeowners, to open up their spare bedrooms, their spare units, their granny units, those sort of things, as a scalable solution that's there now. I know in the old cities, like the town I grew up in, Redlands, Southern California, the original roads, the original homeowners became the original apartment building owners. So they just kept building little side units on their homes until they had a 10-unit apartment complex. Those all started off as like 1 or 2 bedroom homes. And so the idea was that it kept the wealth local. It made the older generation, gave them a retirement income. It provided funds to fix up their properties and to keep them in check without having to be reverse mortgaged, which I think is a bad idea. There's lots of solutions, and I would love to sit in on any sort of like think tank that might be open to the public. I feel like maybe I could provide some feedback. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to speak to the council?
Hi, April Belleridge again with Business Downtown in Port Angeles. I just want to thank you for putting in the time with this scholarship nomination request. As a parent of a senior currently, anything that anybody can get to help them go to school is very helpful.
Thank you. All right.
Madam Mayor, I have a very unpopular interjection. We missed other consideration item 7, which was to discuss the ad hoc committees for planning commission
You are
and
absolutely
lodging tax.
So, I guess we'll try to make this one quick. So we have nominees for the LTAC. Does the existing, would council be okay if the existing subcommittee for LTAC stay together and decide the nominees for the LTAC? Right? So it was Mike Meredith, myself, and Lindsay. So if you guys are okay, we can maintain a subcommittee? I think that's fine.
And I have one more item of business. I move to excuse Mike French.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, I was gonna.
All right, so we'll do that one first. So we got a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor of excusing Mike French, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye? Anybody opposed? Okay, so Mike French is excused. So, I need a motion to maintain the subcommittee for the LTAC group so that we can nominate members for the LTAC.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
All right, so the motion is to maintain the subcommittee to select LTAC members. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Now, the planning commission. Do we need to create a subcommittee for that? Is that what you?
I would recommend 3 volunteers for that subcommittee. It's an ad hoc committee technically per code, I believe.
What's the timeline?
I don't know that there's an urgency. Ms. Brecky might be able to speak to what the cutoff date was, but I believe terms expire February 28th.
That's correct. Sooner the better. We're in the middle of, we've lost Mr. Steve Hopkins, and just they're in the process of doing a very in-depth comprehensive plan review. So it would be great to just get someone on board sooner than later so they don't get too far behind.
And do you think this is like a whole afternoon or? Any thoughts? I guess there are 7 applications. I haven't done it before and I'm interested, but I need to make sure that I don't sign myself up for more than I can.
I'd be glad to participate in that.
And I would too.
Okay. And it's usually not very long.
Yeah, I would say it, but it wouldn't take a whole afternoon.
Okay, then I'll say yes.
All right, we got 3 volunteers.
Just on Monday afternoon.
Do we need a motion, or are you okay with just 3 volunteers?
Motion would be preferable.
All right, so I need a motion, council.
I make a motion to nominate Jim Moran, Sherry Kidd, and Kate Dexter for the ad hoc committee for the planning commission.
All right, I need a second.
Guess that's me. Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. And look at that, we got business done. We made it, no more missed items. All right, it looks like we are adjourned, council. Thank you very much.